So therefore, energy security is something that we have to work on with a high degree of urgency. And the solution for that is to move as quickly as possible into clean energy, whether it is using renewable energy to generate electricity, whether it is to use renewable energy to power things like data centers or create green fuels like green hydrogen and green ammonia. All of those are areas that now the government is very strongly now pushing forward.
It does seem as though the conversation has shifted because we were talking a lot about green energy over the last couple of years, but then obviously the US President Donald Trump, the US is the biggest global economy in the world. He's saying things like drill, baby, drill. They've pulled back on their climate commitments. So have other countries around the world. So does that worry you?
I do believe that climate change is one of the most central issues facing humanity. If we don't act with the absolute higher sense of urgency on it, then it's going to lead to 2 degrees plus temperature change, which is going to be really, really damaging to the world as a whole. It will lead to all sorts of consequences on food security, migration, droughts, etc. So the consequences are going to be quite dire. But eventually, I feel that technology, which is driving climate change efforts, will triumph over drilling things out of the ground. So I think longer term, it's going to eventually be a situation where the energy transition wins out.
And what do you think about clean energy and how it could help equality, essentially? The divide between rich and poor is quite stark in India. Do you think that that's going to help with that?
I think that clean energy ultimately it's a little bit more democratic than large single location power generating stations because clean energy can be put up on one's roof through government subsidies. It can become very cheap. So all of that is going to bring renewable energy much closer to the common man.
I mean, we were talking about what clean energy is going to look like in 20 years' time, but what would you hope people would say what your contribution to India's development and energy future was? You might be retired in 20 years, who knows? But when they talk about renewable energy, how would you like to be spoken about in the mix?
20 years, of course, I'll no longer be active at the very least. I hope that people think of me as one of the architects of the clean energy transition in India, and not just as one of the people who created policies or who talked about it, but somebody who actually went out and got it done. And if people recognize that I made a contribution in that area and helped set the industry up as being one of the early movers, I think that would be fine from my standpoint.
Thank you for listening to The Interview. You'll find more in-depth conversations on The Interview wherever you get your BBC podcasts, including episodes with Rafael Grossi, Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency, US journalist Maggie Haberman, and Jim Continenza, CEO of Kodak. Until the next time, bye for now.
From the BBC, Good morning, Manitoba, and hello there, Winnipeg. I'm Marcy Marcusa. We're live in downtown Winnipeg in our Studio 15 on CBC. 89.3 FM, 990 AM on that app and on YouTube. Thanks for joining us wherever you're joining us from. And if you had a long weekend like I did, hopefully it was fabulous. The weather in Manitoba, at least in southern Manitoba, did not disappoint. It was hot. It was nice. We had some breezy days, and even yesterday, a little bit of a cool off, which I think after all that heat was much welcome. So today in Winnipeg, for your Tuesday morning, mix of sun and cloud. You're expecting a day with a high of 21 degrees, so it'll stay cooler than we've had certainly over in Brandon. If you're waking up in that city, mainly sunny, 21 for you as well. Winds will be west 30 to 50, so a bit windy in Brandon today. And then up in Thompson, finally, you're expecting a 30% chance of showers and a high of 18 degrees. Again, a little bit windy, northwest 30 to 50. Let's say good morning to the team here. Abby Adeyemi is going to cover the weather on the air from now on, I should say. And Abby's also a senior tech. Hey, Abby. Hello, Darren Marash. Darren Marash is our YouTube producer. If you're watching the show streaming there, say hello to all of us, including Dee. And Corey Funk is in. Corey is directing the show this morning, as usual, and he will be on the air covering your commute. So our regular team in action for this August day. Let's say hello to Heather Wells. Speaking of our anchor, it is 2 minutes to 6 o'clock. She's here to tell us what's happening in the news. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, Manitoba's first supervised consumption site opens a week from today, but some critics say These NDP steps do not address growing needs of young people who are dealing with addictions. We're going to hear more on that coming up, as well as the latest data. A Winnipegger says the WestJet strike has left him in a travel ordeal. Kurt Miskew spent thousands on tickets to get home from London, England, because he couldn't reach the airline by phone. He says now not only is he out $4,800 a ticket, but he also has to spend a lot of time trying to get that money back from WestJet. So we'll hear from him coming up in our next local news at 6:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
Thanks.
Well, the WestJet strike. There'll be a lot of stories coming out today, and we'll continue to follow them. We'll hear the very latest from the national perspective coming up on World Report in a moment. Also, this hour on the program, we're going to be talking more about what is happening with negotiations of the future of the RCMP. A lot of Manitoba communities will be up for new contracts. Stay tuned.
On cue.
I love my grandparents, but I don't think we would have met otherwise.
She recently made her late night debut on The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon. She's written political satire on This Hour Has 22 Minutes. Comedian Maddie Kelly is having a moment right now. She'll be here to tell you about growing up in Vancouver and what sets Canadian comedy apart.
Q. This morning at 10:30 in Newfoundland, and on CBC Listen or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. Starting today, Ottawa has new tools to tackle outside influence on Canadian politics. Foreign agents and entities will need to register to lobby elected officials or government staff. It's a key part of a law in response to secret interference targeting Canada. But as CBC's Elizabeth Thompson tells us, those in charge of the new watchdog say covert campaigns are not in its mandate.
Foreign interference poses one of the most important threats to our Canadian way of life, our economic prosperity, our national security, and our sovereignty.
2 years ago, then Public Safety Minister Dominic LeBlanc tabled legislation in Parliament following revelations that foreign countries had tried to interfere in Canadian politics. It gave new powers to Canadian security agencies. It also called for a watchdog and a public registry. Today, that watchdog and that registry go into effect. But as Foreign Influence Commissioner Anton Bogman starts work, he says his job will focus on foreign influence, not foreign interference.
The office hasn't been set up to address interference writ large. It's really about transparency and public disclosure of influence activities.
He says foreign interference, that is covert attempts to affect what happens in Canada, is a job for the RCMP and other national security agencies.
If it's something that's outside of our mandate, we'll be passing that off to one of the national security partners.
Starting today, those who work on behalf of a foreign government or agency to influence Canadian politicians or government officials will have to register. That will apply to attempts to influence people at the federal, provincial, or municipal level, as well as members of the public. If they don't, they could face fines ranging from $250,000 to $1 million. Elizabeth Thompson, CBC News, Ottawa.
Wildfires are threatening communities in British Columbia. Thousands of people are out of their homes in the Okanagan region. And as the CBC's Caroline Bargout reports, some are learning their properties may have burned down.
Amber Cardenas shared a water song, praying for her people. She just learned her home on the main reserve of the Okanagan Indian Band has been destroyed by fire.
I was very optimistic that our house was going to make it, and to find out that it didn't, it's pretty devastating, and it's a roller coaster of emotions, I'd say.
Chief Dan Wilson says damage assessments are still to come.
We don't know the full impact on families, infrastructure, or our community. Those answers will come, but they will take time.
In BC, more than 8,000 people have been ordered to evacuate or put on notice that they may need to leave. More than half of them forced out by 2 fires in the Okanagan.
So we have clothing, bedding, towels, toiletries, baby items, food, pet carriers, pet supplies.
Christophe Lindley organized a donation drop-off so fire evacuees could get what they need free of charge. She knows what it's like to be displaced by fire. She experienced it in 2021.
Everybody had to leave on very short notice and could hardly grab anything. Like they were running out to save their lives. So just anything that can help them.
More than 100 Mexican firefighters have arrived in BC to join the firefight. Another 200 expected later this week. The province has not said where they will be deployed, and as hot weather returns this week, more evacuations could follow. Caroline Bargut, CBC News, West Kelowna, British Columbia.
A man has been arrested for arson in connection with one of the wildfires burning in Washington state. More than 65,000 people are now out of their homes. 3 out-of-controlled fires are burning near Spokane. Officials confirm one person is being investigated for arson. John Knowles is the Spokane County Sheriff.
We took 37-year-old Aaron Farnacci, a convicted felon, into custody on a single charge of arson in the first degree. Mr. Farnacci is currently in custody and being interviewed by detectives from our major crimes unit here in the Spokane County Sheriff's Office.
Officials say at least 700 homes and structures have been destroyed in the fires. Fire burned through more than 3,000 hectares. European Union officials are holding an emergency meeting today in Ceuta. Last week, thousands of people swam from Morocco, illegally crossing into the Spanish enclave. At least 80 people died, most from drowning. Now hundreds of miners are stranded in a city that is already overwhelmed. The CBC's Anna Cunningham joins me from London. And Anna, what can we expect from today's meeting?
Well, this is a meeting of 27 European Union Home Ministers. They're the ones who deal with issues like immigration as well as public safety in their own countries. And I think it is likely that we're going to see them express solidarity with Spain and try to bring the focus back to how they can prevent a repeat of the scenes from last week. But this situation really shocked many EU nations. The sheer numbers that there were has put immigration right at the centre of this EU agenda. But we're getting an indication that the EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen wants to see a strengthening of critical borders. And Spain, I think we can expect as well to be fairly critical of those fellow EU members who weren't there for it during a crisis.
What's the current situation in that Spanish territory?
The large majority of people have voluntarily returned to Morocco, but we're seeing images today from a beach in Ceuta with thousands of people. It's estimated about 2,000 people. We've also seen images of those people rushing towards deliveries of food and water after days with very little. There are local humanitarian groups who say that those who remain are believed to be from other African nations such as Sudan, Yemen, Mali, who have fled violence and war, and that they are now wanting to stay and seek asylum in the European Union.
Thank you, Anna.
Thank you.
The CBC's Anna Cunningham in London. French officials say more than 150 migrants were rescued this morning. They were trying to cross the English Channel. Their boat caught fire near the port of Boulogne-sur-Mer. The people on board were rescued by 3 Coast Guard ships. Local officials say the Coast Guard took them back to port. In Thunder Bay, tenants of a privately owned seniors building are being told to leave. The owner has unpaid utility bills and dozens of fire code violations. CBC News has been following financial issues and threats of service disconnections since the spring. And as Sarah Law reports, families are seeking accountability.
What's happening here is a travesty against the tenants being displaced.
Michelle Hamilton's son John has lived in Vickers Manor for 12 years. As a quadriplegic with a traumatic brain injury, she worries about whether he'll be able to find another accessible place to live.
And it's very emotional because it's a family, it's a community in here, and now they're being torn apart.
After months of poor living conditions, the city of Thunder Bay is urging residents to relocate. CBC News has been following financial issues and threats of service disconnections there since the spring. Hamilton says the situation is unacceptable. She's calling on upper levels of government to intervene.
Come on, Canada. Pick it up.
Management at Vickers Manor has not responded to a request for comment by CBC News. The riding's PC member of Provincial Parliament, Kevin Holland, says his party is looking into the matter. Sarah Law, CBC News, Thunder Bay.
Tobacco warnings have been on cigarette packages for decades, but now a new series of images is rolling out. They show the graphic reality of cancer, stroke, and heart disease. As the CBC's Matthew Robertson explains, it is to remind smokers of what can happen.
Waterloo University professor Jeffrey Fong has devoted much of his career to studying how policy can get smokers to quit, particularly the impact of warning labels.
We know that introducing graphic warning labels significantly enhances the knowledge of the harms of smoking.
Starting this month, tobacco manufacturers must swap out their warnings with new images provided by Health Canada. The strategy is to prevent consumers from going numb to the images. Earlier this year, the United Kingdom banned the sale of tobacco and vape products to anyone born after 2008, becoming just the second country with such a law. In April, Canada's Health Minister, Marjorie Michel, said she was looking into restrictions like the UK's. In a statement to CBC News, Imperial Tobacco says it will comply with the new packaging changes, but says without proper enforcement, the plan will not meet its objectives. Matthew Robertson, CBC News, St. John's.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report at cbcnews.ca. Click Climate for the story of the wildfire near Vernon, BC that forced thousands of people out of their home. That is on our main page. Click Climate. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, Manitoba. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio. You're live on CBC 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and YouTube. Tuesday after the long weekend. What a beautiful one we had. If you were off, you got to enjoy it. And if not, it looks like this week's going to cool down a little bit, but still be pretty nice out there. This hour on the show must go on. And that was especially true for Folklorama's Ghana Pavilion. Most of their outfits, you might have heard, were stolen 3 days before opening night. And they had 36 hours to get ready to sew all of the costumes needed. And there were a lot of them. We're going to hear how they pulled it off. So stay tuned for that. Also this hour on the program, premiers are urging Ottawa to begin negotiations on the future of the RCMP. But there are ongoing issues that need to be addressed. First, we're going to talk to a criminology expert about what those are. In Manitoba, there are 22 Manitoba municipalities, including the PAW, which have contracts with the RCMP that are set to expire in 2032. So lots at stake across the country and certainly here locally. We'll have that interview this half hour. Right now, let's go to Heather Wells for other stories and headlines. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, Manitoba's Advocate for Children and Youth says the province is failing young people when it comes to mental health and substance abuse. Sherry Gott's comments come in light of recent data suggesting 911 calls involving drugs and youth in Winnipeg have nearly doubled in a decade. We'll hear more about that. And after that one-day WestJet strike, a Winnipegger says he has spent thousands on flights to get home because he couldn't reach WestJet. Kurt Miskew found out August 1st his return flight from London, England had been canceled. With no luck reaching WestJet, he bought tickets with another airline for $4,800 apiece. We'll hear more about that coming up in our next local news at 6:30.
All right. Thanks, Heath.
Thanks.
Let's get into the weather forecast. Abby, how's your long weekend?
Oh, it was a beautiful one, Marcy. And of course, the icing on top of it was, seeing the Spider-Man movie.
Right?
My nephews and my nieces over the weekend.
Okay, no spoilers, but
Castle was there.
did everybody walk out happy? Nephews,
yeah,
nieces, you?
it was beautiful. There was lots of smiles.
I didn't get there yesterday yet, but was the theater packed?
It was packed.
Yeah,
It was
I bet.
packed.
Yeah.
It's something a lot of people were waiting for. And
Bruce.
it's Spidey. It's your neighborhood Spidey. What do you expect? It's
Yeah,
going to be
and there hasn't been
nice and cute.
hasn't been a movie in a couple of years. Yeah. Beautiful weather, as I was mentioning. What about today?
Yes, Marcy, we saw the rain, a light rain yesterday, light rain overnight. It's much cooler across the province as we start today. Southern Manitoba will be seeing more like a mix of sun and clouds. A beautiful afternoon ahead. And same thing for the northern part of the province. We're going to see more like cool temperatures there, but a few clouds and a few showers will definitely be present in the northern parts of the province. Here in Winnipeg, we start in the morning. We're seeing temperatures, some areas 11 degrees, some areas 13 degrees, some partly cloudy conditions there. We will see that transition once the sun makes its appearance. We'll see a mix of sun and clouds with breezy west winds, and a high for today only 21 before it dropped back to about 12 degrees later tonight. And that's what we're seeing across the southern regions, the Pembina Valley, the Westman, the Parkland, Interlake region. Morning temperatures between 7 and 12 degrees with a mix of sun and clouds. And of course, sunshine will be widespread throughout the day in most of the regions, warming to 22. Across the southern, the central region, we're looking at 12 degrees there. Far north, we're seeing 10 to 13. So overall, it's more like a cooler one. Normal, I call it not. It's what some people would see as a normal day across. But you step out, it's cool, and we are kind of below seasonal, so it's really nice today across the regions. For Winnipeg right now, I call it a refreshing break from the heat we've been getting like the last 10 days.
For sure.
So we're starting at 13 degrees right now. We only get to 21 today.
No doubt.
I wouldn't even mention the UV index because it's cool outside.
You know what? It felt like fall a bit this morning, but it didn't stress me out because it's been so hot. It was, as you said, refreshing.
Yeah, I stepped in this morning. I was humming. It feels like October today. It
I
feels
know.
like October
You're going to
today.
stress some people out, but don't worry. Just take it as a nice reprieve. All right. How does it feel in traffic? Mr. Corey Funk is here to tell us that. Hi.
Yeah, hello. Yeah, very quiet commute so far. Haven't heard of any major issues out there. But if you're walking your bike and you're driving, you see some, you could always give me a call on the CBC commuter line. That number 204-788-3093.
Well, as we've been mentioning, and maybe you followed this story this long weekend, Folklorama's Ghanaian Pavilion has pulled off their opening night, and it's a big deal because over 75 costumes were stolen 3 days before their event. So Sunday, all 40 performers had brand new outfits for each of their dances. How did it happen? Well, Jalen Warmanar is here. She's the head of guest services for the Ghana Pavilion. She got a call from her husband on Thursday afternoon that the costumes were no longer in the car. And she's here this morning. Good morning.
Hi, good morning.
You must be so relieved to have pulled this off.
Absolutely. I first have to apologize for my voice. I am a dance mom to three teenagers in the pavilion, and I am a loud cheerer every night. And I should have thought it through last night when I was cheering so loud.
Oh,
because
no.
my voice
Oh,
was
no.
a little rough. But thank you so much for having me. And
listen, there's a good reason to have your voice like that. Before we get to the good news of last night, I want to take people back in case they missed the beginning of this. So when your husband told you that these outfits were gone, what was your reaction? Where had they been?
Well, so for the last couple of months, at all of our rehearsals that the dancers are practicing for the upcoming pavilion, we would bring these huge, oversized, heavy-duty totes back to our home every night because sometimes things do happen with things being taken. And so every night time we would bring them in the house. And so last Tuesday we had an extra rehearsal. And so it was late in the evening and we had put them in my husband's car instead of our van because the trunk is a sealed trunk of a four-door car, has an alarm, everything. And so we left them in there for the night. And then the next day, I got this call from my husband. I was out of town. And at first I thought he was joking. And then it was like, oh my goodness, he's not joking.
Oh.
And so it was despair. It was disbelief. And then it was sadness, panic. What are we going to do? Like these are multiple sets that we had some of our amazing other dance moms took on the task of labeling each piece of clothing with people's names.
How many were there? How many pieces?
There were over 75 outfits, like entire outfits.
All specific to different dances, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
As well as over 20 Ghana jerseys.
And that was to celebrate your the FIFA success, right?
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
So good, the soccer success. So I just want people to know if they're watching on YouTube, they're getting a treat because they're seeing sort of different shots come by of photos that have been shared of these beautiful costumes and outfits that you needed. So who made all of this happen then? How did the community come together to make sure that, the costumes are gone, but the show must go on? How'd you get it done?
So at the first couple of hours, we spent literally driving down back lanes and alleys, searching through dumpsters, through garbage bins, thinking maybe, hopefully, someone, opened them up and realized, oh, what am I going to do with this? Like, these are so valuable to our community, but to someone else, it's not really useful to have, 19 of the identical little kid outfits. And so my husband and daughter made a police report, and then I put a social media post on my Facebook in our community asking in the West End to help us look for them. Lots of family and friends praying for us to find them. And then it was like, okay, but now what? So out of that post, asking people in the West End, having others in our community reach out, people just started offering their services. And so we opened up the venue that we are having our pavilion at.
The Notre Dame Rec Center, yep.
Yes, and over 24 people, I'm calling them our sewing angels, came out with their sewing machines, their tools, all the things. I'm not a sewer. With all their things needed, we were making patterns out of paper towels. People are like, "Oh no, let me go home and grab all my proper sewing supplies."
And so, just to interject here, I mean, you had authentic Ghanaian fabric that was involved in these original outfits and such. So, how did you manage to recreate some of the things that were really special pieces?
Right, that's kind of a miracle. I mean, we weren't like over the last 15 years plus. Many of the outfits, many of the people have come with their fabric, myself included. Our suitcases are packed with fabric, or aunties in Ghana have made these original outfits. So we knew that we probably wouldn't get the original authentic fabrics. However, there were donations from people in the community here who over the years had collected bolts of fabric. So we had some of those just donated to us.
Like, that's so cool that people did this. So everyone sewed, and let's get us to opening night then. How did it go with all the outfits, and how, what was the response of the dancers to learn, no, we did it, here's your costumes?
Yeah, walking in the locker rooms and seeing all these outfits that were hanging on these hooks, all these bright colors, the patterns, because actually a local fabric store, I don't know how, I've never seen this in my life, but a local fabric store had actual fabric that looks and maybe perhaps is exactly similar to the patterns that we see in Ghana.
Amazing.
And so the kids were so excited. They were like, they're all brand new outfits. And so every single dance has been able to be replaced.
So how many dancers and what's the range of ages that are performing at your pavilion this week?
So our largest group involves 40 dancers, ranging from the ages of about 3 or 4 to 18.
Great. And I think there's 7 or 8 dances. The adults do instruments. And does every dance have a different outfit then? That's why all the changes for the costumes?
Yeah, absolutely. There's different styles for some of the dances based on the region of the country, as well as, if it's what kind of a song it's representing. Yes, originally there were outfits for each one. And so we thought, worst case, best case, we're going to use the same, maybe like 1 or 2 sets of outfits and just interchange them. And instead, these amazing sewing angels gave us their time for just 48 hours, and all this was done.
Amazing. Like, what a beautiful community story for coming together. So the rest of the week, obviously, you have until August 8th. You guys are performing for week 1 at Folklorama. The Ghana Pavilion is open. For opening night, did you get a sense that it was maybe extra packed in the crowd? Like, maybe people had heard about this terrible thing that had happened? I'm just curious.
Yes, it was packed.
Yeah.
And I mean, we always are very humbled by the outpouring of support for our pavilion regardless. We're a relatively new pavilion after having been with an amazing African community, which of course we know is a continent. And so now we're slowly representing some countries on our own at Folklorama's events. But no, the energy was it was hopeful, it was resilient, it was celebratory. And it was a little bit surprising for me to sit in the crowd at times. Well, not a lot of sitting, but being in the crowd and just being like, this is a miracle. This is amazing.
Yeah. Enjoy the rest of the week, Jalen. Thank you so much for getting up early this morning. Rest your voice so you can scream more for the kids tonight.
Thank you so much.
You take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Love that story. Jalen Warminer is the head of the guest services for Ghana Pavilion. If you want to read more about what happened with their costumes and then the community effort to make the show go on, cbc.ca/Manitoba. Folklorama Week 1 does continue this week until August the 8th, and then they switch countries for next week. The Ghana Pavilion is on, as I mentioned, at the Notre Dame Recreational Center.
You know the voices that tell the story of our province. Now you can take them anywhere. From the essential start to your day on information radio to the conversations that define our lunch hour on Radio Noon and the pulse of the city on Up to Speed, your local connection is always within reach. Just open the CBC News app, tap the local drop down, and hit play. Your favorite voices, your province, right in your pocket. Download the CBC News app today, your daily rhythm, live and local.
Good morning. I'm Marcy Marcuso with our team here at CBC's Information Radio, your morning show for Tuesday, 6:23 a.m. on this first week of August. We're getting through a lot cooler, partly cloudy. It's 13 right now in Winnipeg. Well, provincial premiers are asking Ottawa for clarity on the future of the RCMP's everyday policing. Now, they want the federal government to start negotiations as soon as possible to address issues like increasing costs and staffing shortages. So there are currently 8 provinces, 3 territories, and some 150 municipalities that have contracts with the RCMP for local policing, all set to expire in 2032. Now, that includes, here in our province, 22 Manitoba municipalities and places and communities like the Paw. So Irvin Waller is a professor emeritus of criminology at the University of Ottawa, and he's here to talk about this. Good morning.
Good morning.
So this is making news, certainly in Manitoba. A lot of communities are worried. Can you tell us how, so for people that don't know, how does the RCMP operate in Canada when it comes to contract policing?
The contract policing is one part of their function, and I think it's important to note the 2 others. So they have the major role in fighting organized crime, drug trafficking, human trafficking, the borders, and they also deal with fingerprints and gun laws, those sorts of things. And when it comes to contract policing, they are providing the provincial police, as you know, in Manitoba, and also you mentioned municipal policing. But this comes with an important subsidy. The federal government pays about 30% of the costs of the provincial component in Manitoba, and then something of the order of 10% depending on the size of the municipality. But what has happened is that the costs of policing in Canada generally have gone up by leaps and bounds. It's now a $25 billion industry from coast to coast to coast. And the RCMP salaries have started catching up with other policing salaries. That means that the province and also those smaller municipalities are facing increasing costs.
I mentioned the PAW. So just for people who have an example here locally, the PAW Mayor, Andre Murphy, spoke to CBC in the spring about this and talked about the costs being, in his view, unworkable. And he spoke about the increases. So the example we had, the PAW, of course, is northwestern Manitoba town. Population is about 5,000. So they are spending $3.2 million on their police in 2025. That was the number. And that was up from just over $2.6 million in 2021. And then the mayor also saying they're spending then on a safety officer program. So obviously across Canada, if costs an issue, they're looking for more money from the feds to help cover it. What else are they hoping will be renegotiated?
Well, in the press release and also separate from the press release, we see innovations to get upstream to tackle the risk factors that lead to violence and property crime and through prevention. And so Nova Scotia has started to do this. And this could be important. I hope that the federal government doesn't wait 6 years to actually do more in helping local municipalities actually have a plan on how to reduce violence and, of course, invest in putting that plan into action. But Canada has generally been quite behind the ball on prevention. We see now in cities, larger cities in the U.S., but also across the UK, significant reductions in violent crime brought about by good analysis of the problem and investing small but important amounts in tackling particularly those folk who are most involved in violence, and also tackling issues relating to violence against women.
So when we hear here that the PAW mayor is looking for a change in the funding model, looking toward, I think you said it's 30% now, but look for the split in coverage, they're reimbursed, but they're looking for a 60-40 or even a 50-50 municipal federal funding model. You're saying that along the way here, it's also about where specific smaller pockets of funding go to target problems, including violent crime. You mentioned Nova Scotia. What's been successful there?
Oh, what's been successful is that they set up a federal provincial inquiry after the mass casualty where a shooter killed more than 20 people, and they didn't just say, too bad, we're sorry about it. They actually got to work to say, well, how can we avoid this? How can we prevent this in the future? And I think that is a report that everybody should be looking at. And they don't need to wait 6 years to do it. Because it talks, yes, about problems of staffing, of response to a critical incident, what can be done to help the victims with it, and also guns. But importantly for me, it talks about prevention and makes really quite specific recommendations. Now, Public Safety Canada has published a number of reports showing how effective it can be to cost-effective, but also effective to actually focus on the situations and the what leads to the violence. So
going
I
deeper.
don't know. Well, going deeper,
Yes.
and people think this is very long term. The results are long term, but the results are also short term. So it's actually as quick as increasing the number of police to invest in prevention.
Irvin Waller, thank you very much for your time on this. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Irvin Waller opening up the conversation, reminding us about RCMP funding across this country, the contract expiring in 2032. Professor Emeritus of Criminology at the University of Ottawa. Your CBC News is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 6:31, it is 13 degrees. Bit of a cool start to the day, and it is going to be below normal. In fact, for the first time in a while, our high today just 21. We do get back to a normal 26 tomorrow. Manitoba's first supervised consumption site opens a week from today. Earlier this year, the province began accepting people at its 72-hour detox center in Winnipeg. Some critics say these NDP steps do not address the growing needs of youth dealing with addictions. CBC's Rosanna Hempel reports.
So this is naloxone.
Alexa Legier has to use her naloxone kit at least twice a day on Main Street in downtown Winnipeg. This Community 204 support worker says at least once a day it's for teens.
2 weeks ago, we had 3 girls under the age of 18 experience a drug poisoning. That's something I haven't seen in the past.
Between 2016 and 2025 in Winnipeg, paramedic responses involving drugs in young people nearly doubled. Calls related to alcohol, crystal meth, and opioids saw the biggest increases. Manitoba's child advocate Sherry Gott isn't surprised.
It's really concerning. We're failing our youth in Manitoba because of the lack of response by government.
The province recently opened its 7th Huddle, a mental health and wellness youth hub in Portage-la Prairie, with another one slated for northern Manitoba. Addictions and Homelessness Minister Bernadette Smith says the government continues to listen and implement changes based on feedback. Rosanna Hempel, CBC News, Winnipeg.
It is not yet clear when WestJet will get back to full and normal operations, but flights are slowly getting in the air. after that one-day strike by cabin crew. About 4,400 flight attendants walked off the job early Sunday. A tentative deal was reached early Monday to end the work stoppage. A Winnipegger says he has spent thousands on flights home after he couldn't reach WestJet. Kurt Miskew says he found out August 1st his return flight from London, England had been cancelled. He says he was presented with an updated itinerary 2 hours later, but that trip didn't show up. With no luck reaching WestJet, Miskew says he bought tickets with another airline.
4,800 each to get home. And then we're just going to have to present the bill to WestJet after that and be like, you guys could have done this for us.
Miskew says he supports the workers in their right to strike, but says the airline has to do better by its customers. WestJet says passengers impacted by the strike will be refunded or reaccommodated. More people in BC's Okanagan region are confronting a hard truth, with a growing number of people finding their homes destroyed by wildfire. One of them, Amber Cardenas, lost her home on the main reserve of the Okanagan Indian Band.
I was very optimistic that our house was going to make it. And to find out that it didn't, it's pretty devastating. And it's a roller coaster of emotions, I'd say.
Across BC, more than 8,000 people have been ordered to flee the fires, warned they may need to leave. More than half of the evacuees have been forced out by 2 fires in the Okanagan. Now, a man has been arrested for arson in connection with one of the wildfires burning in Washington state. More than 65,000 people are now out of their homes because of 3 out-of-control fires near Spokane. John Knowles is the Spokane County Sheriff.
We took 37-year-old Aaron Farnacci, a convicted felon, into custody on a single charge of arson in the first degree. Mr. Farnacci is currently in custody and being interviewed by detectives.
Officials say at least 700 homes and structures have been destroyed as the fires burned through more than 3,000 hectares. You can hear the latest national and international news coming up on World Report at 7. An organizer with Ghana's Folklorama Pavilion says a group of what she calls sewing angels crafted dozens of new outfits after theirs were stolen. The pavilion's performance outfits were stolen last week, just days before Folklorama's kickoff on Sunday. Jaylyn Warmaner is the pavilion's head of guest services. She says the outfits were taken from her vehicle on Thursday. But by Friday morning, a group, including costume designers and people who she says just love to sew, assembled to create new ones.
Over 20 people from Winnipeg all showed up. And for yesterday's first show of this year's pavilion, we had every single dancer for every single dance in a brand new outfit.
Programming at the Ghana Pavilion, as well as the other first week pavilions of Folklorama, runs until Saturday. You can find the latest news updated throughout the day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
Thanks.
Let's get into the regional forecast with Abby.
Oh, cooler than seasonal. I'll tell you a cool start to your Tuesday across the province. Here in Winnipeg, we're starting the day under partly cloudy skies. Temperatures around 13 degrees at the Forks, and we're tracking 11 at the airport at this time. We're expecting a mix of sun and clouds today, with the winds just coming from the west later in the day. We will see a high get to 21. Across other regions down south, we're seeing temperatures between 7 and 13. Also, still cool conditions we're enjoying. More than sits at 12. We're seeing some fog patches that should clear. You warm up to 22. The Westman and the Parkland region starting cool also, with Brandon down at 7 and of course Dauphin at 11, both warming up to 21 with west winds. And we see Gimli sitting at 10 degrees at this time, on its way to 21. Across the northern regions, we're also seeing a cooler day. The Power Flin Flon sits at 12 degrees, aiming for 20 degrees. Thompson starts at 10 degrees, heading for 18 degrees, while around the Gillam and the Tujuli Lake area, we're seeing cloudy conditions. There's a chance of showers with highs holding near 15 degrees, while Churchill starts at 11 with light rain falling at this time, on its way to 14 degrees. So overall, we're expecting a cool day across both the northern regions and the southern regions, with temperatures topping out in the mid-teens in the north, while the low 20s, that's what we'll see down south today. Right now, Winnipeg, we're looking at 13, and we're aiming for a high of 21 today.
Okay, thanks, Abby. I have a story about my dogs, you guys, yesterday. So I always, I have bulldogs. People know they've heard the show, but they get so hot, like they can't handle the heat, right? Little flat-faced dogs. So there's Doug, and he loves being outside. So yesterday, he goes outside, and then we realize he's still outside. Kept checking on him. He's still outside. Kept checking on him. He was just like sitting in the middle of the backyard, just like, no, leave me alone. I can finally stay outside. I think a lot of people probably felt like that for hours. He just stayed out there all day long because in the heat it was too much. He kept trying and then coming to the door panting, trying again, coming to the door. So all day he sat in the lawn.
Yesterday was cool. I'll take it. The pet really noticed it.
Oh yeah, for sure. Pets and the folks. And you were camping, Corey. Must have been kind of nicer, I think, to be in an area where
It
was
great.
cooler.
Well, we were up in Hecla camping last weekend. The kids noticed it too. Actually, yesterday even they were just like on the beach. It was so nice. We didn't have to put on any sunscreen. They were just like running around. They were running faster, I noticed, because they just had more
Energy.
Energy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Didn't have to conserve it as much. So it was
Totally.
great.
How's it commute this morning?
Yeah, it was very, very quiet commute so far. The one issue to keep an eye out for is Henderson and Layton. Those lights, they are flashing red. So keep an eye out for that. Treat that as a four-way stop. Other than that, though, been pretty quiet overall. But if you do see something, if you're walking, you're biking, you're driving, you can give me a call on the CBC commuter line. That number 204-788-3093.
All right. Thanks, Corey.
Thank you.
Well, next, it's time for the Business Digest on CBC with Megan Reed.
Good morning. Like everything else, weddings are getting more expensive. And not just for the couples saying, I do. A new report from BMO shows that the cost of being a maid of honor or a best man is up significantly, with just wedding guests pegging the cost of attending at just over $1,500. Here to walk us through the numbers is Tony Tintin-Alley, head of specialized sales at BMO. Good morning, Tony.
Good morning. How are you?
I am well. So, were you surprised by the numbers in your study?
I was surprised by the numbers in the sense that I actually thought they seemed a little low, to be honest, right?
Okay, that's fair.
Right? I think, when you look at sort of particularly the millennial generation, they're in that zone in their life where many friends are getting married, and just the desire to have these big, elaborate, really special occasions, I think it's just putting a lot of stress on the guests and in the people in the wedding, right? Like, it's not just about, I'm going to give a gift. It's like, okay, like there's a lot of destination weddings. There's a lot of outfits to all the different things leading up to the wedding. And I think that is causing a lot of anxiety and stress amongst guests, and even more for those who are actually in the wedding party.
Okay, so besides inflation, which we know is up, why are the numbers so high? Is it social media?
I think there's a combination of a few things. I think there's a little bit of social media. I think that there is sometimes this like competition to kind of one up people in the wedding friendship groups. I think there is, just the level of cost of just doing certain things today, particularly the cost of travel, the cost of, any type of destination wedding, and just the reality of, particularly for where you are in your life, you may have multiple of these events in one summer or in one season. And I think that is what's causing a lot of stress and cost for people.
Yeah, my daughter, after COVID till now even, I think she's had 5 weddings per summer, and she's either been in the wedding party or maid of honor. So it's nuts. It's nuts. So who's the most stressed by these prices or costs?
Definitely the millennials, right? Like they're, almost 50% of millennials are the ones that are most stressed about just the financial cost of attending a wedding. Then you look at sort of the Gen X and Gen Z, which is a little bit smaller. Boomers, are about 30%, but a lot of the boomers are retired and they're probably attending grandkids' weddings and so on. But the reality is for millennials and, Gen X and Gen Z, their friend groups are the ones that are going through a lot of these weddings. Just as you mentioned your daughter, I have a colleague, she's on her 4th wedding just so far this year, and we haven't even hit August, and she has 2 more coming up.
It's nuts. So is there anything people can do to keep these costs down?
There's all the standard things, like make sure you plan out a budget, think about, if you're going to spend, think about the kind of credit cards or loyalty programs or cashback cards you're using. So at least you can like pay yourself back and earn if you need to fork out some money. And I think it's also part of it too, is really sitting down and sort of evaluating what you can and cannot do based on your budget, because you don't want to get to the end of the summer or the end of the year and say, oh my God, I've collected all this debt, just to be, go to all these weddings. And so, be mindful of sort of, where you are financially and just how much you can and cannot do to celebrate some of these moments with your friends and family.
And it's okay to say no if the numbers don't match.
It totally is. Like, I think it's one thing to like attend a lot of weddings, but if there's a lot of destination weddings, if there are a lot of pre-wedding events, there's Jack and Jill parties, and there is, bachelor and bachelorette parties and all of these things. And so, maybe you don't want to be in 4 wedding parties in one summer. Maybe you think about if you're buying a suit or a dress, can you use that at a couple different weddings because the guests will be very different? Just think about how you can sort of manage your expenses if you've got a lot of weddings to attend in the summer.
Well, besides, making myself out as this old person yelling at the clouds, Tony, I've learned a lot today. Thank you so much for your time.
You're very welcome. Have a wonderful day.
Tony Tintin-Alley is head of specialized sales at BMO. For CBC Radio, I'm Megan Reed.
And we should have our regular business reporters back in the chair soon. Of course, we've got summer staffing, so regularly we hear live from Crystalie Ramlakan. Right now, Megan covering the latest. You can also find the latest markets and opening days numbers and other business stories at cbc.ca/business. Tuesday, August 4th, lights red flashing, as Corey just mentioned, Henderson at Leighton. Otherwise, should be a pretty decent morning out there. Current temperature in Winnipeg is 13, Brandon is 8, and Thompson is sitting at 10 degrees. Well, next on the show, let's return to a story that caused some stress, to say the least, for some people in one northern Manitoba community. In Pimicikamak Cree Nation, they were under lockdown for part of this long weekend. A man was ultimately arrested following the deadly shooting of a 42-year-old man on Friday. Saturday, though, before he was located, people were told to stay inside. CBC Sophia Peralta-Barone spoke with Chief David Monius and asked him how he felt after the suspect was arrested, and the lockdown was lifted.
Well, it's, I guess I would say it's mixed feelings. First of all, it's sad that this incident had to happen and that we had to go into lockdown. So, we've been evacuated for quite a bit already the last year and a half. And having the lockdown people was really upsetting. And also for the people who were really not happy with it, but they understood why it was. And at the same time, it was. I'm happy that we were able to resolve locating the individual in question.
How quickly did everything happen?
Well, it happened very quickly. I think within an hour after the incident happened, met with the police, and we had talked about trying to control movement in the community. So this way, this guy will be easily located. So we figured that we would do a lockdown, so that way we can monitor who's going and coming within the community, and it would allow us to actually set up some borders as well, check stops, so we could check any vehicles that may be driving around just in case the individuals in there. And we talked about trying to control people's movements and for their own safety, first of all, because we don't know if this guy would kidnap somebody and drive off and so forth, right? I mean, he already killed somebody, and we're concerned about people's safety, so it's better that they stay home.
And has your community ever experienced anything of like this, like of a lockdown and of anything like this before?
Well, we did have lockdowns in terms of before, where some people were considered to be shooting in the community, but it was very short as it was resolved, because most people have guns in our community before hunting and so forth. And, it hasn't been that bad, other than when we had COVID, we had lockdowns.
Yeah.
And we've done that for about 2 years. So they experienced that, and we experienced how to organize ourselves around that and make sure people's needs are met and that they're taken care of as well.
And okay. And I guess sort of touching, you mentioned a little bit at the beginning, I guess, what's sort of the feelings of the community after like evacuation, no power. I know you recently had to tackle some like wildfire issues. How are people feeling after like one thing after the other?
Well, that's what was really upsetting for a lot of people. So here we go again, right? And we have to get locked down. We have to limit mobility. We were limited when we were evacuated, when we were in the hotels, and now we're home and we're limited in terms of our mobility. So that's what a lot of people were expressing grief about, but they were not upset in terms of being mad, and just that they're upset in terms of not being able to move around and losing that sense of freedom, right? And I think that's what they don't like, is having that loss of sense of freedom.
And I guess sort of when it's such a tight-knit community, what do you think it's something that people don't realize when something like this happens? Like when it's a tight-knit community, how does that impact you guys?
Well, it impacts a lot of us because, we feel the pain, we feel the loss. Because, like I said, we know each other. It's a close-knit community. We know our successes, we know our failures, we know what happens to each one of us on a daily basis. It's not anything that happens that doesn't affect us. I mean, there's some people that are upset, some people are mad, some people are, it's very sad, and some people are really angry, and one answers and one defense. They want things to be done in a proper way. That things could have been handled in a different way, maybe. It's there's a lot of range of emotion that affects different community members.
That was the chief of Pimicikamak Cree Nation, David Monius, in conversation there with CBC's Sophia Peralta-Brown in our newsroom over the weekend, talking about the aftermath, the emotions involved with people trying to understand what they went through this weekend. The community members had been told to lock down as they were searching for a man on Saturday. So that man was ultimately arrested following another man who was killed in the community deadly shooting of a 42-year-old man on Friday. So he was located, and people have now been told, obviously late Saturday and early Sunday, rather, they were told things were safe. So, of course, the community has been through a lot. We'll talk more about the aftermath of it in the days and weeks ahead.
How do you listen to your favorite Manitoba shows when you're on the move? Get your daily dose of information radio, Radio Noon, and Up to Speed, live and on demand. Just open the CBC News app, tap the local drop-down, and hit play. It's the easiest way to keep our province at your fingertips. Download the CBC News app today.
Well, up next on the show, during the summer, members of Parliament head back to their local communities. But what exactly is the work of MPs during the recess period? Alex Ballingall is here to talk about it, Deputy Ottawa Bureau Chief for the Toronto Star. Good morning.
Hey, good morning.
A lot of people wonder this, actually. Are MPs actually on a break?
Yeah, it is a question that actually comes up quite a bit. The first thing I would say is that politicians are normal human beings. Maybe not normal human beings, but they're human beings. And they take vacation like everyone else. So, the House is off for several months. They're not off that entire time, but, I don't know this for a fact, but I know that many of them, and I would say if not all of them, do take some sort of vacation over the summer months, like most people. So I think that's obvious. That's part of it. But no, when the House is not in session, they're not entirely off. So it's not like they have like a 4 months to just kind of hang out by the pool or whatever. They're still working. They're still doing stuff, with the exception of, vacation sprinkled in the way a normal person would have it.
And they can basically choose what they're going to be doing. And I'm guessing, and is this correct in terms of if they're catching up on some, paperwork or research, or if they're visiting different community members, if they choose to be, in their ridings for outreach and such, or is there any obligation that they each have to meet?
I think it depends on the party. They do. It depends who they are too, I think. So, on the one sense, there's kind of the classic cliche of the barbecue circuit where, every MP is, they've got the month of the summer. They're going to community events. They're staging some Canada Day celebrations, or they're doing, Pride stuff, or whatever kind of seasonal things happen over the summer that they're engaged with in their community. But they might also have, fundraising obligations kind of for their political machine, gathering intelligence on the way people feel about certain issues in their communities and in their regions and provinces, feeding that up to kind of the partisan overlords of whatever party they're with. Having regional caucus discussions about what their priorities should be, what people care about. And then they might, they might be a government minister or a parliamentary secretary or an opposition critic of a government minister. And the kind of the work of governance and criticism of the government and the opposition is also continuing, obviously, all the time. So it does depend who they are, but they all have, to a certain extent, both kind of partisan and governance duties that they're still engaged with.
Mm-hmm. What about when it comes to behind the scenes politics? How are party leaders going to use this summer, you think, to rethink things like strategy and party priorities? What are you hearing?
Well, there's always, I think almost every summer, and this one's no exception, there's rumors that there might be a cabinet shuffle, that, the prime minister will reassess and shuffle up the team of ministers around him. There's been speculation about that for a long time already about Carney, several waves of it, but we're in another one now that a lot of people think he'll shuffle the cabinet before the House returns in September. So we'll see. I don't know that. That's kind of rumor level, but a lot of speculation behind the scenes about that. And then for the other parties, I do think that, I think the strategizing and the assessment of how things are going is in the game of politics is always happening. They might have a bit more time in the summer to do it. And there's a bit of speculation about the Conservatives right now. Pierre Poilievre, the past couple of weeks, has been kind of less out there than he has been previously. And it's possible that they're assessing, how to kind of improve their standing. Their fundraising has gone down. They're still way behind the Liberals in the polls. So he's kind of dispel the doubts about his grip on his party and the direction they're going in. And then, Avi Lewis from the NDP also spent a few weeks in Quebec, deepening his understanding of the Quebec nation and French, et cetera. So there is, opportunities to kind of assess and strategize and make adjustments over the summer for sure.
And I know, we're a month out here, so it's August 4th. So when the House does reconvene this fall, what's top of the parliamentary agenda? Remind us.
Well, I think, it's sort of outside the parliamentary agenda, but I do think it's going to take up a lot of oxygen, which is kind of the twin national unity issues of first of all, the Quebec provincial election with the Parti Québécois being strong in the polls, promising a third referendum. And then 2 weeks after that election, there's the Alberta referendum, which, a referendum to have another referendum on independence. So I think those two kind of national unity issues are going to heat up and take up a lot of political oxygen. But there'll be others. The U.S. trade issue has been huge and dominant. Questions about whether that will progress to a deal in the fall will be a big focus. Carney's hosting this big global investment summit in Toronto just before the House comes back, and that'll kind of put the spotlight on his efforts to grow the economy, fortify it, reduce our dependence on the U.S., and whether there'll be results there. And I'm sure we'll get blindsided, as always, by things that we can't predict that will take up a lot of time and attention, and it'll be interesting as always. So, we'll have to see.
All right, Alex, thanks for your time.
Anytime. Thanks for having me.
Alex Ballingall is the Deputy Ottawa Bureau Chief for the Toronto Star. 4 minutes now to 7 o'clock. Let's have a look at your Tuesday weather here. Partly cloudy, 13 in Winnipeg. In the day, we see a high of 21, mix of sun and cloud. Winds will become west at 30 this morning in Winnipeg, and clear tonight, low 12, sunny tomorrow. So looking like a pretty clear, sunny week. It does get a little bit back to a little hotter later in the week, but nothing over 30 that I'm seeing in Winnipeg. In traffic, lights are out. Just a reminder, treated as a four-way stop. They're in a red flashing position at Henderson and Layton, and you can call 788-3093 if you have any other problems. Coming up, speaking of modes of transportation, we're going to check on the latest with WestJet resuming flights after a 24-hour strike by flight attendants this weekend, which turned a lot of things upside down. So we'll get the lay of the land in a full interview this morning. Also, a climatologist will be here here to talk about what's ahead in August after a wild July with tornadoes and straight line winds and crazy storms that uprooted trees. So we'll find out more about that. As well, coming up at 7:40, there's a new pilot program at Mini U that's making sure kids with higher needs can be successful in a camp setting. We'll hear more about how the program is working when we talk to some clinicians at the University of Manitoba. Heather Wells is in with other news updates. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, Manitoba's advocate for children and youth says the province is failing young people when it comes to mental health and substance use. Sherry Gott's comments come in light of recent data suggesting 911 calls involving drugs and youth in Winnipeg have nearly doubled in a decade. A Winnipegger says the WestJet strike has left him in a travel ordeal. Kurt Miskew spent thousands on tickets to get home from London, England, because he couldn't reach WestJet by phone, online, or in person. We'll hear about his ordeal coming up in our next local news at 7:30.
All right, thank you. In addition, I just want to add something to traffic here. Ron called our commuter line. He said that eastbound Portage at Memorial seems to be blocked. Now, people are forced to reroute onto Memorial. That's right out of our CBC studio window here. I'm not seeing anything backed up, but I might not be able to see it from this vantage point. So thanks for the call, Ron. We're not sure what's causing the blockage, but eastbound Portage at Memorial. 788-3093, as I mentioned, with any updates. World Report has updates next on national and international news. Stay tuned. You're with CBC.
Today on The Current.
Albertans can pay out of pocket for MRIs. No doctor's referral needed.
I'm Lauren McGinnis. Albertans can now pay for MRIs and other tests without a doctor's referral. While the government says this will lead to early detections and save lives, some healthcare professionals are worried it doesn't address the shortfalls of the public system. Coming up on The Current.
The Current, this morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. Starting today, Ottawa has new tools to tackle outside influence on Canadian politics. Foreign agents acting on behalf of entities beyond our borders have to register. If they don't, they could face serious fines. But there are limits to what this new office will do. The CBC's Megan Fitzpatrick joins me with this breakdown from Ottawa. And Megan, who is being tracked by this registry?
So this office really is aimed at making foreign influence activities more transparent. These are often legal, and in many cases, they fall under what could be considered traditional international diplomacy, but sometimes they cross the line into deceptive attempts to sway politics. So the point of this new registry is it's to be a public one and allow Canadians to see who is engaging in foreign influence activities and exactly what those activities are. So if someone enters into an arrangement with what's called a foreign principal, could be a foreign government or an organization or a political party. And if the goal of that work is to influence a political or government process in Canada, like a piece of legislation or an election or a referendum, and if the influence activities include communicating with an elected official or a government employee or communicating with the public or providing money or other items of value, then they may need to register. They have 14 days. Non-compliance could mean fines ranging from $250 all the way up to $1 million. And in serious cases, there could be criminal charges.
The Watchdog's commissioner has said that the mandate focuses on foreign influence, not interference. What does that mean?
Yeah, so the new commissioner is Anton Bogman. He's the former chief electoral officer for British Columbia. He'll be overseeing this new office. And he says they're primarily focused on out in the open foreign influence activities. Foreign interference, on the other hand, that's where it involves more covert or secretive attempts to interfere in Canadian politics or in government decisions. And that falls more under the purview of the RCMP and Canada's national security agencies. So he says the watchdog will determine what falls under influence or interference on a case-by-case basis, and then take the necessary steps, including passing information on to Canada's security agencies.
Thank you, Megan.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Megan Fitzpatrick in Ottawa. Wildfires continue threatening communities in British Columbia. Thousands of people are out of their homes in the Okanagan region. Some residents, like Amber Cardenas, are learning that they will not be able to return home. Her home on the main reserve of the Okanagan Indian Band has been destroyed by fire.
I was very optimistic that our house was going to make it, and to find out that it didn't, it's pretty devastating, and it's a roller coaster of emotions, I'd say.
In BC, more than 8,000 people have been ordered to evacuate or put on notice they may need to leave. More than half of evacuees have been forced out by 2 fires in the Okanagan region. A 37-year-old man is being held in connection with one of the wildfires burning in Washington state. Police say he's being investigated for arson in one of 3 fires in the Spokane area. As Steve Futterman tells us, more than 65,000 people have been forced to evacuate their homes.
Oh my God. Throughout the Pacific Northwest, in Washington, Oregon, Idaho, and other states, fire crews are trying to get the upper hand. The fires have destroyed hundreds of structures, including this woman's home in Spokane, the hardest hit area.
All of our memories are gone. My dad just died, and all of his stuff was still in there too.
Officials believe the most destructive of the fires in Spokane, the Old Trails fire, was the result of arson. Last night, an arrest was announced.
We took 37-year-old Aaron Farnacci, a convicted felon, into custody on a single charge of arson in the first degree.
John Knowles is the Spokane County Sheriff.
A witness, a citizen, very good citizen, noticed a male standing on the side of the road looking into the trees as he was going to pick somebody up. About 10 minutes later, as he was coming back through the area, he noticed the male was bending down near some grass.
Officials say the suspect was carrying a lighter and waterproof matches when arrested. Meanwhile, high temperatures and strong winds continue to make it difficult for any significant containment. Officials are calling these some of the worst fires in the area in decades. The hope is that conditions will improve even slightly to allow some progress. But right now, firefighters are doing their best to prevent any more homes from being destroyed. Steve Futterman, CBC News, Los Angeles.
Japan's government says it's trying to restore basic utilities to homes damaged in last week's earthquake. Thousands of people in Kumamoto are staying in temporary shelters. Electricity has been restored. Many homes still don't have running water.
また水につきましては、避難所や福祉
Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi says they are trying to maintain a continuous supply to evacuation centers and medical facilities. Water could prove critical in the coming days. Kumamoto is in the grips of a heat wave. Temperatures in some of the areas have hit 40 degrees for the first time on record. The strike may be over, but the headaches continue for people flying with WestJet. The airline is resuming services after reaching a tentative deal with flight attendants yesterday. The CBC's Laura Howells is following developments from St. John's. And Laura, what is happening at airports this morning?
Well, we know WestJet flights are back up in the air at airports across the country, certainly a relief for passengers. But not all WestJet flights are back in the sky. There are some still canceled. We've reached out to WestJet to find out exactly how many are still affected and still waiting to hear back on that. It's going to take some time to get everything back to normal. Passengers are still dealing with the fallout from this strike. Here in St. John's, I spoke with people who are rescheduled to flight several days later. The original flight was Monday. Now they're flying out Friday. Others paying out of pocket to book on new airlines because they can't miss work. We heard from a man who couldn't get people in for his wedding. People having trouble yesterday getting through to WestJet on the phone. I imagine there's a lot of backlog to sort through. This is not going to be a simple snap back to normal for the airline or the people affected.
When can we expect things to get back to normal?
Well, it's hard to say. WestJet tells me they're in the recovery phase. It says while flights begin to operate, the disruption will continue as it works to restore its network. In the meantime, the airline says passengers should check their flight status before going to the airport. And while WestJet gets operations back up and running, WestJet flight attendants are now looking at that tentative deal between the airline and CUPE, voting on whether to ratify it. They now have just under 30 days to do that. We still don't know what exactly is in the agreement. We know that getting paid for ground work was a key union demand, and CUPE said yesterday that this deal recognizes more of their work and increases compensation for that work. So we'll be keeping our eyes on the sky and the ground again today.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
The CBC's Laura Howells with me from St. John's. In Thunder Bay, tenants of a privately owned seniors building are being told to leave. The owner has unpaid utility bills and dozens of fire code violations. CBC News has been following financial issues and threats of service disconnections since the spring. Michelle Hamilton's son has lived in the Vickers Manor for 12 years. She says the situation is unacceptable.
What's happening here is a travesty against the tenants of being displaced, and it's very emotional because it's a family, it's a community in here, and now they're being torn apart.
Hamilton is calling on upper levels of government to intervene. Management at Vickers Manor has not responded to a request for comment. And finally, tobacco warnings have been on cigarette packages for decades, but now a new series of images is rolling out. They show the graphic reality of cancer, stroke, and heart disease. As the CBC's Matthew Robertson explains, it's to remind smokers of what can happen.
Waterloo University professor Jeffrey Fong has devoted much of his career to studying how policy can get smokers to quit, particularly the impact of warning labels.
We know that introducing graphic warning labels significantly enhances the knowledge of the harms of smoking.
Starting this month, tobacco manufacturers must swap out their warnings with new images provided by Health Canada. The strategy is to prevent consumers from going numb to the images. Earlier this year, the United Kingdom banned the sale of tobacco and vape products to anyone born after 2008, becoming just the second country with such a law. In April, Canada's Health Minister, Marjorie Michel, said she was looking into restrictions like the UK's. In a statement to CBC News, Imperial Tobacco says it will comply with the new packaging changes, but says without proper enforcement, the plan will not meet its objectives. Matthew Robertson, CBC News, St. John's.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. For news anytime, cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, Manitoba. Welcome to Tuesday, post-long weekend. If you had it off, August 4th. Thanks for joining us on Information Radio on CBC. 89.3 FM on YouTube, the app. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This hour on the program, we're going to be talking about huge challenges in our community. Advocates say they want better support for young people because the paramedic calls involving kids and drugs have nearly doubled in a decade, the calls, rather. This is what an outreach organization had to say about the situation and how it's been worsening.
Kids are just trying to be accepted and find a place to be accepted, and a lot of times it's the gangs that they turn to, and then the drugs just come with it.
That was a support worker from Community 204. That organization will talk more about what they're seeing when it comes to kids and drugs in our community, and the data I mentioned coming from the Winnipeg Fire Paramedic Service. So stay tuned for that. Also, what weather is in store for August after a crazy July? That's all this half hour. Right now to other headlines on 89.3 FM with Heather Wells.
Good morning. Well, a kidnapping in Winnipeg that a man was recently sent to prison for highlights a growing so-called gray market for vapes. Court heard the incident happened after the breakdown of a business partnership involving gray market vape products being sold in convenience stores. University of Manitoba law professor Michelle Gallant says those products pose several risks. We'll hear about it coming up. And after that one-day WestJet strike, a Winnipegger says he has spent thousands on flights home from London, England, after he couldn't reach WestJet. And he says now he faces this prospect of trying to get reimbursed from WestJet, which he says could be a battle that drags on for a year. We'll hear those stories and more in our next local news coming up at 7:30.
All right. Thanks, Heather. Thanks. And still so many questions, right, about WestJet. So we have a full interview about it in moments here on CBC. So stay with us. Abby, how's the weather today?
It's a cool start across the province. We're seeing temperatures well below seasonal for early August. Southern Manitoba enjoying plenty of sunshine and a few clouds later. Similar conditions we're seeing up north. Winnipeg, 13 degrees right now. It's sunny at the Forks.
All right. Thanks, Abby. Corey Funk's here with traffic.
Yeah, a couple things to keep an eye out for. Dugald and Bernays, the lights are flashing red right now. Same thing actually at Henderson and Layton as well. Those lights also flashing red. Also heard from Ron early, like about 10 or so minutes ago, that there seems to be some kind of blockage happening eastbound Portage at Memorial. Not sure what, but he said people were rerouting onto Memorial. Looking out the windows here, because it's right by the studio, it doesn't look super backed up. It's not backed up to the CBC building or anything yet. So I'm curious to see if it's open since or what's going on. Give me a call if you have any updates on that or anything else you're seeing out there. If you're walking, biking, driving, would love to hear from you. That number, 204-788-3093.
So let's hear more about WestJet. How is it? What have they agreed to? The flight attendants that were out this weekend, and then how is all of this impacting travel and possible compensation moving forward? Jim Byers is with us. He has been following the story, and Jim is a travel journalist. Good morning.
Morning, Miss.
All right. So what do we know about the details of this agreement?
Yeah, unfortunately, I've been looking around the internet and looking at various websites. I can't find an official union explanation of the deal. They held a press conference yesterday and said that they wanted to, run it by their members first and explain everything to them before they posted anything. So I've not seen the official union's version of what was agreed to. So I'm unfortunately have to just rely on WestJet's version. Not that I doubt them, but it's always nice to have both sides. But according to the airline, there's a 13% pay increase for this year. That's retroactive back to January 1st, and then 2.5% pay raise in the next 3 years after that. But the big thing here is the deal includes what they call duty pay or work money for unpaid work. Which WestJet says is equivalent to about another 12% salary increase. It sounds strange to most of us, and pretty much it's a very unusual situation, but flight attendants, at least those in North America, have traditionally not been paid for boarding time and when they're helping passengers get on board the plane and doing all of that other work that goes into getting passengers going. They're only paid for when the plane is actually moving. This corrects that, and so it's a big change in the industry. Now there's also some other smaller changes, increased meal allowance, more healthcare spending, and that sort of thing. But it's this duty pay or unpaid work that was the biggest sticking point.
So we've heard how travelers have been affected. Even in the news this morning, we've been hearing from some Winnipeggers who had all kinds of things turned upside down. How soon might air travel on WestJet flights get back to normal?
Well, it was a 3-day strike last year, as many of us recall from Air Canada when their flight attendants were out. That was 3 days. So it took Air Canada, quite a while, about 5 days to get back to a full schedule. This was only about a little more than 24-hour strike. So it doesn't seem to be nearly as bad. I've not seen a statement yet from WestJet today about what their operations will look like. But according to FlightAware.com, which is a flight tracking website, according to them, there's only 12 canceled flights so far today from WestJet. And, they usually run a good 450 flights a day. So if there's only 12, if that holds, they've done a pretty remarkable job of getting their planes back in the air.
What stories have you been hearing about travelers who were affected this long weekend?
Well, it's pretty sad. You see these stories, and airline travel is such a vital part of so many people's lives, and they save up their money for years and years, sometimes to go on big vacations, to Europe or what have you, and people are missing out on weddings, anniversaries, they miss birthday parties, you name it. It's pretty sad. There's a Canadian fellow in San Martin in the Caribbean who said, he was his flight was canceled home. He and his family had to book another hotel because the one they were at didn't have room. Then he wanted to get his car rental extended. He had to go to the airport to do that. Then he had to book a ticket on a U.S. carrier to get home through going through Philadelphia. He said he was going to be out $5,000 or $6,000. I was told by a friend of mine who lives in Calgary that one of their friends was supposed to fly from Barcelona to Paris to Calgary with WestJet and some of their partners, but they were told the best they could do was Barcelona to Paris, to Washington, D.C., to Chicago, to Nashville, to Calgary. So, instead of two flights, it was going to be 6. So there was a lot of that going on, and it's really unfortunate. But I think the bigger issue to me, Marcy, that I've read about over and over from people was just the lack of information. Somebody said they were waiting 12 hours on the phone. Somebody said they waited 19 hours. And that's I don't think that's acceptable. And obviously this is a very difficult situation, and there's a lot of people to deal with. But you would hope that the airlines would do a little bit better job and maybe provide a little bit better communication with people along the way. Even if they can't help, just answer the phones.
Yeah,
right?
That's one of the frustrations actually of Kurt Miskew, who's one of the Winnipeggers we talked to that's in the news this morning. He said he couldn't reach the airline by phone, so he was trying to figure out, I've spent this money, this has been changed, his itinerary was sent, but then it didn't match, like all kinds of problems. So
Right.
what do we understand about WestJet's promising compensation for canceled flights and costs associated with what's happened?
Well, that's the problem. In Canada, a labor disruption, a strike, is considered a situation outside of an airline's control. In other words, it's not their fault. So the Canadian law state that if a flight is canceled because of a strike, the flight, they have to be booked, passengers need to be booked on another flight within 48 hours, even if it's on a rival airline. If not, then the airlines are supposed to provide a refund and make alternate travel arrangements at no cost. However, the big question, unless you travel overseas where there are different rules, if you're just traveling within Canada or North America, Canadian rules apply, and there is no compensation for hotels, meals, or other related expenses. So you can try, and certainly I would encourage anyone to ask WestJet for the ultimate compensation, but they may not be eligible for it.
And just last, what might this agreement signal for flight attendants working for other airlines, especially when it comes to, the compensation that is going to be new for when they're checking people in, that we understand may be in this agreement?
Well, absolutely, no doubt that other airline unions are looking at this and rubbing their hands in glee and thinking that they're going to get the same thing, and that's only natural. Air Canada, Delta Airlines actually began a lot of this a couple of years ago by finally paying the flight attendants for some of this duty time or some of this unpaid work. Air Canada did the same thing last year, and now it's WestJet. I was talking yesterday with John Graddick, who's an aviation expert in Montreal, and he said Porter Airlines has already been paying their flight attendants for some of their boarding duties, and that he believes both Porter and Air Transat are heading into contract talks with their cabin crew. So we may be seeing a repeat of the same kind of negotiations with Porter and Air Transat over the next few months.
All right. Thanks for your time. Appreciate it, Jim.
You're very welcome. Have a good day.
That's Jim Byers with the latest that we have on the WestJet situation. We'll hear more from local travelers in your 7:30 news. Jim Byers is a travel journalist.
I'm Michelle McDougall, your local reporter for CBC Manitoba in Brandon. You're listening to CBC Radio 1.
Well, our weather took a turn over the weekend, back to what feels more seasonal, even a little cool today with a high of 21. But by midweek, we're again back to around 28 degrees. But wow, July, so many days over 30 and all kinds of crazy weather with rain, straight line winds, even tornadoes, of course. Let's find out about August. David Phillips is with us live, climatologist in Environment and Climate Change Canada with Environment and Climate Change Canada. Good morning, David.
Marcy, and you described it so well. July was stormy, hot, humid, but, the heat actually began earlier. I mean, I remember a period at the end of May was very warm. You've had these heat spells in June, May, June, about 2 in July. So I think overall the summer has been kind of on the warm side. 15 days where the temperature's been above 30 in Winnipeg. You normally would see 7 of those, but it's also been very humid. And the nights, we had these tropical nights. I think these are temperatures at night that don't fall below 20. We've had 5 of those guys. And we normally see 1 for the whole summer in Winnipeg. So it's been very humid. Humid index values up to 48 in July. But July was, you're right, Marcy, about 2.5 degrees warmer than normal. But really, the flavor of the entire summer has been like that. But yes, some winds, not as much rain as you might think we got in July. We had lots in June with some flooding northwest of Winnipeg in the Stonewall area and also out in the Parkland area. But it's been a summer for everybody, and a little bit of smoke to add into that. And yes, tornadoes, my gosh. gosh, you've got 10 tornadoes in the province this year so far, and we normally would see for an entire summer about 7 on average. So it's been stormy, it's been hot and humid, but very much summer-like.
Before we move to August, David, you said maybe not as much rain in July as one might have thought, and you're right to point out that it was the end of June when more of that was starting.
Yeah.
But do we have numbers for rain in July?
Yes, well, in Winnipeg, about 40 millimeters of rain, which is about half of what you normally would get. Now, there might have been more days with rain than you remember, but yeah, that was, but June had twice as much rain. So what kind of June was like, it recovered sort of from May. May was down, so you got some rain in June, which helped that. And then the June rain helped to cushion the blow for lower precipitation in July. So overall, I think the province has done well with precipitation. One area maybe a little bit less than normal, but when you average it out for the whole summer, it doesn't look too bad at all.
What can we expect for August then, David?
Well, you talked about this week being cooler. Yes, 21 degrees today for a high in Winnipeg. I mean, that's about 5 degrees colder than normal. No single-digit values at night. I always look and see, well, when are we going to get 9 degrees or 8 degrees? Not that this week. We see this week being, a little bit up and down, but really wide open, lots of sunshine, no threatening weather at all. We look at August and we see kind of normal to warmer than normal. Now, August, Marcy, is usually about a degree cooler than July. So, it's beginning, the days are getting a little shorter, so you see that. But what's so interesting is when we look beyond August, September, and October, it shows warmer than normal. And Marcy, I tell you, one of the big things that I've seen in recent years are the gorgeous falls. Yeah, summer season may be over on Labor Day, but the summery weather continues. You've had in the last 4 of the last 5 years, you had some of the warmest falls on record, including in 80 years, the warmest, the second warmest, and the fourth warmest. My gosh, I mean, it is carrying on. And then, my gosh, I look beyond that. I'm really getting ahead of myself. We look at El Nino, and my gosh, we know what the winter's going to be like.
And,
well, listen, it's a super El Nino. It is not weakened. It's only strengthened. It's sort of achieved its top billing as being a super El Nino. We see in other parts of the world, El Nino is giving you the effects, the impacts that it was forecasted to do. And what we see in Winnipeg, and not, I wouldn't bet the family farm on it, but my gosh, you look at 3 years ago, a fairly large El Nino, and my gosh, it turned out to be the warmest winter in Manitoba in 80 years. In Winnipeg, I mean, you had 16 cold days. Marcy, you normally get 52 of those guys.
Yeah.
Half the amount of snow. So my sense is that, hey, we're not going to cancel winter, but boy, it looks pretty soft and save about maybe 15-20% on your home heating bills. So, hey, there's something to like about a milder than normal winter in Winnipeg. So, hey, the good news from a hot summer to a promising warm fall to my gosh, a non-winter looks pretty good.
Tell you what, as long as it doesn't get too extreme, then I think we'll take it in Manitoba. Thank you, David, for teeing it up for us. Appreciate talking to you always. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
David Phillips, climatologist in Environment and Climate Change Canada. 7:26, we'll take that news. Let's go to morning sports and see what's making news there. Paul McGowan is in this morning. Hi, Paul.
Hi, Marcy.
So the Jays, let's start. How busy were they at yesterday's trade deadline?
They were about as busy as everyone expected. After trading Kevin Gausman on Sunday, yesterday they moved Jeff Hoffman and Dalton Varsho, but they also made a move with the short-term future in mind. They flipped prospect Arjun Nimala to the Los Angeles Angels for pitcher Jose Soriano, and Soriano was nearly unhittable in the early part of this year, so an interesting move there. Also interesting was that Varsho got moved to the Houston Astros, the team that the Jays were playing last night. And so his departure from and reunion with his old teammates happened all at once.
The friendships that you kind of create over there and all the things you kind of grinded together, and a lot of those memories kind of flooded back in. I felt it with Gauzy, broke down, cried with me and George, and it's just one of those things where it is emotional, but at the end of the day, it's business, and I'm in a better place now after a couple hours just kind of getting my breath, but obviously wish those guys the best because I really do care for a lot of those guys, especially the coaches, and it's hard.
Varsho a little bit choked up there, and it is odd to see him in an Astros uniform. The Jays come out on top last night, a 3-1 victory. Game 2 against Houston goes tonight.
Oh, it'll be hard to walk away from the Jays after last year. That's going to compound everything. All right, let's go to tennis. We watched a big moment for a young Canadian in Toronto.
And there are a handful of younger Canadian wildcards in that draw. One of them is Kayla Cross, just 21 years old, and just 2 previous WTA matches under her belt. She went up against Katie Boulter of Great Britain yesterday and earned a straight sets upset victory. And her excitement afterward very much matched the moment.
Definitely shocked. I think I said, oh my gosh, a few times while I was walking up to the net. Still doesn't really feel real. Checked my phone after the match. I think I had like 100 notifications, so got a little overwhelmed. I kept saying congrats, congrats, and then I was like, okay, this is a lot. I'm just going to put it away for now. Just walking out and seeing so many people cheer for me, and when they called my name during the warm-up, I was trying not to lose focus and stuff like that. But yeah, it was really nice to have that much support.
Cross is likely to have even more support tomorrow. She goes up against Ann Lee of the United States. And an extra busy day on the men's side in Montreal today. 4 Canadians in action. That includes Gabriel Diallo on center court later this evening.
Let's end with soccer and questions about the popularity of FIFA's president. What's the latest?
Well, even after scrapping his plans to allow private investment in the World Cup, Gianni Infantino is in trouble, which is interesting because even after he reversed that red card to Fuller and Balogun, FIFA's president looked invincible. He had more than 90% of member countries willing to endorse him continuing as FIFA president. That number is now much smaller. CONCACAF has called for, quote, a comprehensive reckoning with this presidency. New UK Prime Minister Andy Burnham weighed in and said that Infantino is not the right man to lead football. And yet, despite these losses seeming to come from all sides, former FIFA Vice President Jim Boyce thinks that Infantino could still keep his job.
I do honestly believe that if it goes through a vote, he probably will have enough support to carry on. But it's been a big blow to Infantino, without a shadow of doubt. The president of FIFA is a very, very high-ranking position. And now, if he wants to retain his position, he's got to start the repair work that has been done by the damage to what I can only describe as a ludicrous suggestion.
That repair work, as Boyce puts it, would need to start soon. The FIFA presidential election is in March in Morocco.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Marcy.
Paul McGowan of Morning Sports. We're coming up to local news here on CBC 89.3. And clinicians over at the University of Manitoba are making sure that all kids can experience camp. And it's thanks to a new inclusion program.
Having families in the community be able to rely on their child staying in a program that they're enjoying and having meaningful experiences in is something that I imagine isn't currently available as it should be.
That conversation about how they're making it available over at U of M's minicamp is coming up along with your latest weather and traffic after your CBC Winnipeg news.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 7:30, a cool 13 degrees, partly cloudy right now. We'll see a mix of sun and clouds today, and we don't reach seasonal. We stay below it. 21 is the high in Winnipeg today. We do get back to a normal high of 26 tomorrow. A kidnapping in Winnipeg that a man was recently sent to prison for highlights a growing so-called gray market for vapes. Court heard the incident happened after the breakdown of a business partnership involving a gray market vape products being sold at convenience stores. Now, the products aren't necessarily illegal, but they do skirt the law in some way. University of Manitoba law professor Michelle Gallant says gray market products pose several risks, including organized crime groups could begin to see it as another way to make money.
It's not about sort of the person who owns the 7-Eleven selling this stuff. It's about organized crime, or really sort of folks who've never kind of come close to abiding by the law, seeing this as a lucrative additional area.
Queen's University professor Christian Leuprecht says many people don't realize the problems with buying gray market vapes, and he says more public awareness is needed. Manitoba's advocate for children and youth says the province is failing young people when it comes to mental health and substance abuse. Sherry Gott's comments come in light of recent data suggesting 911 calls involving drugs and youth in Winnipeg have nearly doubled in a decade. Calls related to alcohol, crystal meth, and opioids saw the biggest increases. Gott says existing addiction services and prevention work aren't meeting the growing needs of youth. For years, her office has called on the province to develop a mental health and substance use strategy for youth.
We need something that is tied to funding, and there's co-occurring disorders happening. There's mental health, there's substance use. The youth need a lot of support. And so however that looks, either, land-based or institutional, I think we need to respond to youth today.
Addictions and Homelessness Minister Bernadette Smith says the government continues to listen and implement changes based on feedback. The province recently opened its 7th Mental Health and Wellness Youth Hub in Portage la Prairie, with another slated for northern Manitoba. You can hear more on this story coming up in this next half hour right here on Information Radio. A Winnipegger says the one-day WestJet strike has left him in a travel ordeal. Kurt Miskew spent thousands on tickets to get home from London, England, because he couldn't reach WestJet by phone, online, or in person. He says his flight was canceled over the weekend, and then he got another email with new trip information, but says the update never showed up on his itinerary.
Real gut punch when I think about the amount of money that I'm going to have to battle a giant corporation over for the next year, probably. It's stressful. That's not a cheap chunk of change. That's a whole nother vacation money right there, or an emergency fund money right there. That's, $4,800 per person is crazy.
Miskew says he supports the airline's workers, but says WestJet needs to do better by its customers. Wildfires are threatening communities in BC. Thousands of people out of their homes in the Okanagan. Some people, like Amber Cardenas, are learning they won't be able to return home. Her home on the main reserve of the Okanagan Indian Band has been destroyed by fire.
I was very optimistic that our house was going to make it, and to find out that it didn't, it's pretty devastating, and it's a roller coaster of emotions, I'd say.
To Spokane, Washington, where a man is under arrest and charged with setting one of the devastating wildfires that have destroyed hundreds of homes there. The 37-year-old suspect is accused of first-degree arson. A witness telling police he saw a nervous-looking man near the side of the road just before some grass went up in flames. The motive is unclear. You can hear the latest national and international news coming up on World Report at 8. Winnipeggers stepped up to sew dozens of new outfits after Ghana's Folklorama Pavilion had theirs stolen. The pavilion's performance outfits were stolen last week, just days before the festival kicked off on Sunday. Jay Lynn Warmaner is the pavilion's head of guest services. She says the outfits were stolen from her vehicle on Thursday, but from Friday to Saturday, more than 20 people gathered to sew new outfits for the pavilion's dancers.
I would never have wanted this to happen, and I felt so sad that it happened on my watch. But this has turned into such a blessing. All of the prayers and hopes and wishes that people had for us just multiplied over and over again.
Programming at Ghana's Pavilion, as with all the other first week pavilions, runs until Saturday. You can find the latest news updated throughout the day. Just head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right. Thanks very much, Heather.
Thank you.
Into the weather forecast now. It's time for your regional forecast after a cool start already to the morning.
Yeah, it's a cool one after the overnight cool temperatures we enjoyed for sure, and we're seeing below seasonal temperatures across the board this morning. Winnipeg right now, we're looking at temperatures sitting around 13 degrees, mainly sunny outside. We're expecting a mix of sun and clouds as we get into the day. We'll see a high get to 21 as the west winds increase later in the day. Now across the southern regions, we're looking at Morden sitting at 12 degrees, enjoying some sunny conditions there. Gimli is also mainly sunny at 11. Dauphin is at 11. Cloudy conditions there. And the Brandon area, we're looking at sunny conditions, 8 degrees. Daytime highs topping out near 22 for most of the regions in the southern half of the province, though we will notice those winds coming out of the west later We go into the northern regions where we see more, the temperature still staying cooler and cloudy conditions we're seeing with a power flame influence sitting around 12 degrees, heading for a high of 20. Norway House and Thompson, both in the low teens, heading to highs of 18 and 19, and respectively. The Gillam and Tudela Lake area, and of course Churchill, we're looking at temperatures between 14 and 16 at this time. Far north towards the Churchill area, we have some misty conditions there. So overall, it's a cool day, both for the northern regions and the southern regions, with temperatures topping out in the mid-teens for now, and then we'll see lows of 20 in the southern region. Currently Winnipeg 13, it's sunny. We get to 21 later.
All right, thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
I even looked at my jeans today and considered them for a moment before I chose not to wear them.
I'm wearing jeans and I wear socks with my sandals today on the way in.
How long has it been since the sock made an appearance in your life?
It's been a while. Yeah.
That's Corey Funk. He's here with your commute.
Yes, very quiet commute overall. I haven't heard of any major issues out there. Henderson, Layton, those lights have been flashing red all morning, so look out for that. But if you do see anything else going on, give me a call on the CBC commuter line. That number 204-788-3093.
All right, thanks, Corey.
Thank you.
I'm Marcy Marcusa. You're listening to CBC. Corey and Abby and Darren behind the glass. Heather Wells in our news department this morning. 13 and mainly sunny, as we've been hearing, is the current condition in Winnipeg. Well, it is summertime, and Mini University, Mini U at the University of Manitoba, is piloting a new specialty inclusion program this year. Made for You. U is the letter. Made for You is a clinician-led program. It's designed for kids who need some more adaptations to be successful in a camp setting. It's a pilot project this year. It's going to gather feedback from families and staff over the summer to shape their inclusion support in the future. Mini U does offer inclusive mainstream programming for kids who thrive in a standard setting with limited support, but goes a little further. So Ashley Gagnon is with us, Associate Director of the Children's Programming at the University of Manitoba. Good morning.
Good morning.
And also with us this morning, Camilla Thorne-Tomsland, who is with us, who is a pediatric occupational therapist in Winnipeg. She's also co-founder of a nonprofit called Full Circle Community that helps kids with disabilities access recreational activities. So one of the partners with U of M. Good morning. So I'm wondering how the program actually works, Ashley. Can you walk us through, where the idea for this pilot came from?
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having us. So our program Made for You is running 2 weeks during our summer camp season this year. And so last week was our first, and this will be our second. The idea came from, years of offering integrative programming for children with diverse needs. And after meeting Camilla and her partners last year, we recognized a need to open programming specifically designed for children who need a bit more adaptation through clinician-led support. And through the fall and winter this year, we worked together to design Made for You.
And Camilla, you know a lot about this as well because you research accessibility to camps for kids who might need a little more help. Tell me a little bit about how much of a barrier there can be to getting kids involved in activities like this.
Yeah, I think there can be quite a significant barrier, especially over the summer, because just the nature of summer camps is that they're quite short and it can be quite difficult to come to understand a child's needs within that time. So that's where Made for You has been really nice because we've added in a couple extra steps in order to understand children a little bit more. Like we did an assessment night to get to know people a little better. We had parents fill out kind of more detailed forms. And then we've been able to match campers with inclusion workers that kind of meet their needs really nicely.
How is that with thinking that could be a model moving forward? That bit of pre-work can make sure that the camp is, works for kids that might have some extra needs? Yeah, it has been very helpful. I think that would definitely be a model to keep in mind moving forward. Ashley, how did the first week go?
We had 15 children here last week. Many of them was their first time in camp with us. Some have been in camp previously. And they did all kinds of really fun things. Gross motor movement. They had spent some time on the wall at the wall climbing room, some arts and crafts and science experiments and sort of things that the students had planned and prearranged before they arrived.
Is there a moment that stands out for you where maybe a family or a child was particularly happy to be there or achieve something that they really enriched their life?
There were lots of great moments last week, but the favorite for me was watching them explore the bouldering room during a period of time last week where they otherwise might not have gotten to do that activity.
And the bouldering room is the climbing? Is that what you're talking about?
It is climbing, yeah.
Yeah. So can you describe that a little bit? What do you mean they otherwise might not have been able to? What extra, what made it possible for them to do that?
We arranged a time where the Made for You group had exclusive access to the wall climbing space. So they had more, like the coach was available, and they had more time to sort of explore and get comfortable with their inclusion leader, and then time to climb themselves.
What do you hear, Camilla, from families, either families that are participating in this or maybe families in your research that talk about what it's like to not be able to access programs like Mini U?
Yeah, well, I guess first and foremost, what becomes very challenging for families of kids with disabilities is just any sort of childcare over the summer. I think that gap starts when they're young and increases massively as they become kind of older kids and then into teenagers. So I think this fills a gap as well. And then I think just having quality programming that they can trust, that their kids will be well taken care of and that they will likely be able to work the entire workday without having to worry about coming to pick their kids up, I think is really impactful.
What is there a range? Sorry to interject there. I'm wondering, Camilla, is there an age where it becomes, more difficult for parents where they really feel like they have nowhere to turn in the summer? Or is it if you're living with a child that needs some of that extra help, summer's always difficult?
I mean, summer is always difficult, but I think when kids age out of daycare is when the impact really starts to be felt because then the options are very limited. A lot of families will just burn through a lot of their respite hours during the summer in order to be able to work, which isn't necessarily, in my opinion, isn't necessarily fair. That's not what respite should be for.
Ashley, when you think about where you'd like to see the program go from here, I know you're still just in the pilot phase, but what are your thoughts on the future?
I think we've had a really fantastic start. The partnership with Camilla and her clinician co-founders has been invaluable. And so moving forward in the future, I can't imagine a world where we wouldn't do it together. So I hope that we are able to offer more weeks than we have been this year and continue to grow our partnership.
Well, enjoy the cooler weather this week. If you're doing other physical things with the kids, it'll actually, with the campers, it'll feel better outside for sure. Ashley, enjoy the rest of Mini U.
Thank you so much for having us.
And thank you, Camilla. Thank you. With us this morning, Ashley Gagnon, the Associate Director of Children's Programming at the University of Manitoba, and Camilla Thorne-Tomsland, who's a pediatric occupational therapist and co-founder of a nonprofit group called Full Circle Community. They help kids living with disabilities access recreational activities.
Manitoba is a conversation that never stops. From your first coffee with information radio to the midday pulse of Radio Noon and the drive home with Up to Speed. Don't let your day get in the way of your favorite shows. Just open the CBC News app, tap the local drop-down, and hit play. Bring your community with you. Download the CBC News app and stay live with us.
Well, August long weekend behind us. Welcome to Tuesday, August 4th, everyone. I'm Marcy Marcusa with our team here at CBC. Thanks for joining the morning show. It's sunny out there. Nice clear sky, bit of a cooler day, high of 21 today. Clear into tonight, and then tomorrow we're expecting some sunshine to start and possible showers in the afternoon. We're going to return to the highs of around 28, so a little bit hot for later in the week. Well, perhaps our best days are ahead of us. That is the name of this next tune. Best Days from Ruth B.
Sad.
I remember when you held me and told me that you'd always be my home, be my home. And we laughed, oh we laughed. Do you remember the best day of my life?
Love that. That's Ruth B. New single from her. She is an artist out of Alberta, and it's called Best Days. It is 12 minutes to 8 o'clock now on CBC. And coming up after 8, we're going to check in with one of the Palestinian Canadians who contributed to the Nakba exhibit that is on now at the Canadian Museum for Human Rights to hear how they're doing after sharing their stories with the world. So stay tuned. That's coming up. Right now, paramedic calls involving kids and drugs have nearly doubled in a decade. In Winnipeg, calls reporting alcohol use increased from 219 incidents in 2016 to 404 in 2025. And opioid-related calls went from 5 in 2016 to 53 last year. Now, this is according to data from the Winnipeg Fire Paramedic Service. Last week, Addictions and Homelessness Minister Bernadette Smith confirmed that the 72-hour detox center and Manitoba's first-ever supervised consumption site will reopening on August 11th. That's a week from today. And they will only, though, to begin, start with accepting adult patients. Now, someone who's watching what's going to happen is Alexa Legier. She's a support worker with Community 204, Legier, rather. Here's a clip of her conversation with CBC's Rosanna Hempel.
60 scoop survivors, it's passed down. So like these kids, a lot of time kids end up in care. So parents can't take care of their children because they're struggling with addiction themselves. They're struggling with trauma themselves that they've never resolved. And then the kids end up going into care and then the cycle continues. So it's drugs, it's gangs, it's everything that's... Kids are just trying to be accepted and find a place to be accepted. And a lot of times it's the gangs that they turn to and then the drugs just come with it.
That's Alexa Legier speaking about kids getting involved with drugs. She's a support worker for Community 204. That's an outreach program that helps people get access to basic needs. Now, Daniel Hidalgo has been running it for a number of years. He's director and founder of the organizations. Hi, Daniel. So how often are you seeing, an incident involving, a kid, a young person, and drugs?
Over the last year, past couple of years, we've seen like a really big increase in a younger demographic finding themselves struggling with homelessness, marginalization, and unfortunately substance use and ultimately addiction.
And what's that like? I mentioned you've been, at the ground floor with 204 for a long time. So how does that compare to previous years?
It's really challenging to watch and to see and to respond to. We always try to have like an empathic view for the things that folks are experiencing. So when we see young folks, we want to feel hopeful when we see, the people that will hopefully one day contribute to the future of society. And when we see that their needs aren't being met and that their supports aren't in place, and ultimately that leading to them finding themselves in the circumstances they're in, it's certainly really disheartening and heartbreaking. And it really hurts our spirit because these are the folks that should be living to meet their potential, not surviving an abundance of issues.
Some of these numbers are quite something from this Winnipeg Fire Paramedic report. Opioid-related calls from 5 in 2016 to 53 last year. We've been talking to other community organizations here on CBC, a lot of them just getting used to administering naloxone. Have you had to do it?
Absolutely, and it's become something that's happening consistently, and it's something that we've ultimately had to desensitize ourselves to having to do. We're lucky that there is a solution for a lot of these instant overdose crisis that do bring folks back, but it's something that we're having to utilize a lot more often, and we have to rely heavily on the supply of Narcan, also known as naloxone.
What's pressing on the kids? Like, what's putting young people in this type of position? What are the factors that you want people to understand so we can maybe get to a better place?
So when we take into consideration the increase in numbers, we have to take a look at what's transpired within that time frame. So if you're thinking over the last 5 to 10 years, you got to take into consideration COVID. That time period was a big disruption in the critical stages of youth development. So where most kids were developing emotional regulation skills, socialization skills, independence, and resilience, they were actually finding themselves isolated, cut off from the world, stuck in a situation of anxiety and limbo. a lot of uncertainty, but that isolation played like a really key role in what we're seeing. Overall, the mental health struggles that have been increasing dramatically has been something that's, contributed to the root cause of a lot of addictions and substance use, because they're using it as a way to cope. So they're using it to numb some of their trauma, to relieve their anxiety, to escape from potential depression, to not have to deal with a lot of expectations that society puts on them that they themselves may feel that they're not meeting. And then when we take a look in the number one cause for addictions across the board, and that's underlying unresolved trauma. So the things that folks have been exposed to and had to live with and survive, whether it's intergenerational trauma, family violence, involvement with overrepresented systems such as CFS or justice. And then when you take a look at the actual drug supply itself, it's been incredibly toxic, with folks not knowing what it is they're taking, with an increase in fentanyl, counterfeit pills, and just the potency is a lot higher.
How often are you seeing kids that don't really know what they're taking?
Well, like initially, almost every single kid doesn't know. They just know that they don't like what they're feeling. They don't like what they've had to experience, and they don't know how to escape it. And then there isn't much of a resolution or an option or opportunity put in place to deter them from that susceptibility.
I know that you have said a lot of times the community focus on the big, the drug itself, and media, we can be guilty of that too, right? We want to know about, and that's important to understand. But you're saying we really have to have an understanding of the underlying things and the causes, or maybe mental illness or therapies. So how do we improve that area in our community?
Well, like in our line of work, what we've seen, I can only speak to the things that I've experienced personally and the things that I've actually witnessed. And what we've seen is that when you give someone as a designated person, a designated mentor that perhaps has some lived life experience or knowledge of these things, that really cares and keeps the unconditional best intentions for that particular kid at the forefront of their mind, and all that they do, that helps. And when you're putting kids in a position to fulfill their purpose and to fulfill the desire to belong to something positive, where they have access to whatever it is that they need, or whatever it is that they hope to accomplish, and you support them and you're there, and there's not limitations put on that. And that's something that we've seen that's been really, really helpful, but it's so limited and it's hard to be there 24/7.
When you think about your work with young people in Winnipeg, doing this for the last number of years, what are your, tell me one of your greatest success stories, right? Like somebody that you're like, you know what, like, let's just hold this up as like a model for like helping more kids, like just making sure that and it might also speak to what it really takes, because you're talking about one-to-one mentoring. Like, I think it sounds like you're really asking the community to lean into relationships.
Yeah, relationship and connection's huge, and success is going to look different for each individual. Some people's version of success might simply be taking care of their basic needs, hygiene, just showering today, getting up today, and accomplishing small goals, going to school and doing those things. For other folks, success looks much bigger, where it actually leads to them breaking the cycles that they've actually survived their entirety of their lives, learning about what it means to become an educated young person, learning what it means to to maintain long-term employment, to pay their own bills, to understand the nuances of what it means to contribute to the community and society. Even I have one youth that I used to work with that pays their MPI bill every month, and they're proud, and they pay their rent on their own every month, and they come from systems, and they come from the child welfare system, and now they're a functioning member of society, and because of their experiences, they in turn found themselves giving back. And for me, that's the biggest type of success, when you overcome a cycle and then you contribute to others overcoming that same cycle as well.
All right, Daniel, always nice to have you on CBC with us. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
Daniel Hidalgo with us, the director and founder of Community 204. CBC has team coverage on this story. If you want to read more of this story, cbc.ca/Manitoba. Coming up after 8 o'clock in the show, we will be talking to one of the Palestinian Canadians who contributed her family's history and artifacts to the Nakba exhibit. She also interviewed survivors to be part of it, or made suggestions about people who would be willing to be part of it. This is at the Canadian Human Rights Museum. She's been working to develop it for years. So how's she doing after sharing stories with the world? Stay tuned. That interview is coming up after 8 o'clock. It's mainly sunny, 13 degrees. The high today, 21, a lot cooler than we have had this weekend. We're going to have an update on traffic right after your news headlines with Heather Wells.
Good morning. Well, a kidnapping in Winnipeg that a man was recently sent to prison for highlights a growing so-called gray market for vapes. Court heard the incident happened after the breakdown of a business partnership involving gray market vape products being sold in convenience stores. University of Manitoba law professor Michelle Gallant says those products pose several risks. We'll tell you about those coming up. Also, Winnipeggers stepped up to sew dozens of new outfits after Ghana's Folklorama Pavilion had theirs stolen. Those stories and more coming up in our next local news at 8:30.
Thanks, Heather.
Thank you.
Lights are still flashing red at Burnay and Dugald. However, they are now working at Henderson and Layton. Give us a call if you have a problem. 788-3093 is the commuter line. Stay tuned. World Report is coming up next on CBC.
On cue.
I love my grandparents, but I don't think we would have met otherwise.
She recently made her late-night debut on The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon. She's written political satire on This Hour Has 22 Minutes. Comedian Maddie Kelly is having a moment right now. She'll be here to tell you about growing up in Vancouver and what sets Canadian comedy apart.
Q. This morning at 10:30 in Newfoundland. And on CBC Listen or wherever you get your podcasts. The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current.
I'm Lauren McGinnis. Albertans can now pay for MRIs and other tests without a doctor's referral. While the government says this will lead to early detections and save lives, some healthcare professionals are worried it doesn't address the shortfalls of the public system. Coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. Starting today, Ottawa has new tools to tackle outside influence on Canadian politics. Foreign agents will need to register to lobby elected officials or government staff. It's a key part of a law in response to secret interference targeting Canada. But as CBC's Elizabeth Thompson tells us, those in charge of the new watchdog say covert campaigns are not in its mandate.
Foreign interference poses one of the most important threats to our Canadian way of life, our economic prosperity, our national security, and our sovereignty.
2 years ago, then Public Safety Minister Dominic LeBlanc tabled legislation in Parliament following revelations that foreign countries had tried to interfere in Canadian politics. It gave new powers to Canadian security agencies. It also called for a watchdog and a public registry. Today, that watchdog and that registry go into effect. But as Foreign Influence Commissioner Anton Bogman starts work, he says his job will focus on foreign influence, not foreign interference.
The office hasn't been set up to address interference writ large. It's really about transparency and public disclosure of influence activities.
He says foreign interference, that is covert attempts to affect what happens in Canada, is a job for the RCMP and other national security agencies.
If it's something that's outside of our mandate, we'll be passing that off to one of the national security partners.
Starting today, those who work on behalf of a foreign government or agency to influence Canadian politicians or government officials will have to register. That will apply to attempts to influence people at the federal, provincial, or municipal level, as well as members of the public. If they don't, they could face fines ranging from $250,000 to $1 million. Elizabeth Thompson, CBC News, Ottawa.
Wildfires are threatening communities in British Columbia. Thousands of people are out of their homes in the Okanagan region. And as the CBC's Caroline Bargout reports, some are learning their properties may have burned down.
Amber Cardenas shared a water song, praying for her people. She just learned her home on the main reserve of the Okanagan Indian Band has been destroyed by fire.
I was very optimistic that our house was going to make it, and to find out that it didn't, it's pretty devastating, and it's a roller coaster of emotions, I'd say.
Chief Dan Wilson says damage assessments are still to come.
We don't know the full impact on families, infrastructure, or our community. Those answers will come, but they will take time.
In BC, more than 8,000 people have been ordered to evacuate or put on notice that they may need to leave. More than half of them forced out by 2 fires in the Okanagan. More than 100 Mexican firefighters have arrived in BC to join the firefight. Another 200 expected later this week. The province has not said where they will be deployed. And as hot weather returns this week, more evacuations could follow. Caroline Bargut, CBC News, West Kelowna, British Columbia.
A man has been arrested for arson in connection with one of the wildfires burning in Washington state. More than 65,000 people are now out of their homes. 3 out-of-control fires are burning near Spokane. John Knowles is the Spokane County Sheriff.
We took 37-year-old Aaron Farnacci, a convicted felon, into custody on a single charge of arson in the first degree. Mr. Farnacci is currently in custody and being interviewed by detectives from our major crimes unit here in the Spokane County Sheriff's Office.
Officials say at least 700 homes and structures have been destroyed in the fires. Fire burned through more than 3,000 hectares. European Union ministers say they need to do more to protect their borders from illegal migration. An emergency meeting was held virtually today to discuss Ceuta. The border of the Spanish enclave was rushed by more than 70,000 people last week who swam from Morocco. Since then, officials say that most people have returned, but the deadly rush shone a light on the EU's border strategy. Magnus Brunner is the European Commissioner for Internal Affairs and Migration.
It's about the full implementation of our new rules. That is key. Full implementation of the pact. Rules on migration, including screening, border procedures and swifter returns, very important elements there, both from a security perspective, but also, of course, from a migration perspective.
In the meantime, Brunner says the EU has offered emergency financial assistance to Spain. He says those who crossed illegally were fueled or misled by online disinformation and criminal smuggling networks. French officials say more than 150 migrants were rescued this morning. They were trying to cross the English Channel early, and their boat caught fire near the port of Boulogne-sur-Mer. The people on board were rescued by 3 Coast Guard ships. Local officials say the Coast Guard took them back to the port. In Kumamoto, Japan, temperatures feel like 40 degrees for the first time since record-keeping began. The heat wave is an additional challenge facing survivors of last week's earthquake. The CBC's Malone Mullen has the latest.
Amid the piles of rubble, Kumamoto's newly homeless are facing yet another challenge: intense summer heat. Survivors like Haruto Kubo are living out of their cars, desperate for a cool place to rest. His living room is filled with collapsed beams and broken furniture. Over 4,000 houses were damaged by last week's earthquake. There's debris everywhere, and survivors have no running water or power. The government says 1 evacuee has already likely died of heat stroke. The weather is so bad, officials are calling it a double disaster.
With these extreme climate conditions, because we can't say how long, this quote unquote double disaster is going to go on for.
Bethany Meidinger is with the National Research Institute for Earth Science and Disaster Prevention. She says just finding the people most at risk of heat stroke is a major hurdle. Getting them into shelters, perhaps for weeks, another challenge. Prime Minister Sanaya Takeichi is in the region to assess conditions for survivors. The government has set up emergency facilities with air conditioning, but many are still sheltering in place, and there's nothing anyone can do about the weather besides wait it out. Malone Mullen, CBC News, Tokyo.
In Thunder Bay, tenants of a privately owned seniors building are being told to leave. The owner has unpaid utility bills and dozens of fire code violations. CBC News has been following financial issues and threats of service disconnections since the spring. Michelle Hamilton's son has lived in Vickers Manor for 12 years. She says the situation is unacceptable.
What's happening here is a travesty against the tenants of being displaced, and it's very emotional because it's a family, it's a community in here, and now they're being torn apart.
Hamilton is calling on upper levels of government to intervene. Management at Vickers Manor has not responded to a request for comment by CBC News. The strike may be over, but the headaches continue for people flying with WestJet. The airline is resuming services after reaching a tentative deal with flight attendants yesterday. The CBC's Laura Howells is following developments from St. John's. And Laura, what is happening at airports this morning?
Well, we know WestJet flights are back up in the air at airports across the country, certainly a relief for passengers, but not all WestJet flights are back in the sky. There are some still canceled. We've reached out to WestJet to find out exactly how many are still affected and still waiting to hear back on that. It's going to take some time to get everything back to normal. Passengers are still dealing with the fallout from this strike. Here in St. John's, I spoke with people who are rescheduled to flight several days later. The original flight was Monday. Now they're flying out Friday. Others paying out of pocket to book on new airlines because they can't miss work. We heard from a man who couldn't get people in for his wedding. People having trouble yesterday getting through to WestJet on the phone. I imagine there's a lot of backlog to sort through. This is not going to be a simple snap back to normal for the airline or the people affected.
When can we expect things to get back to normal?
Well, it's hard to say. WestJet tells me they're in the recovery phase. It says while flights begin to operate, the disruption will continue as it works to restore its network. In the meantime, the airline says passengers should check their flight status before going to the airport. And while WestJet gets operations back up and running, WestJet flight attendants are now looking at that tentative deal between the airline and CUPE, voting on whether to ratify it. They now have just under 30 days to do that. We still don't know what exactly is in the agreement. We know that getting paid for ground work was a key union demand, and CUPE said yesterday that this deal recognizes more of their work and increases compensation for that work. So we'll be keeping our eyes on the sky and the ground again today.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
The CBC's Laura Howells with me from St. John's, and at cbcnews.ca, our main page has live updates on this recovery phase for WestJet. That is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, Manitoba. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio. We are live in downtown Winnipeg in CBC's Studio 15 under a sunny sky and a bit of a cooler start to the day. So for this Tuesday, August 4th, we find that we're going to have temperatures that will not start with a daytime high of 30 or above. Abby will be in with a forecast in a moment. It's sunny currently and 14 degrees. Coming up this half hour in the program, a feature interview. This half hour, we're going to check in with one of the Palestinian Canadians who not only contributed to the Nakba exhibit at the Human Rights Museum, Canadian Human Rights Museum here in Winnipeg, but she also worked for years to develop that exhibit. How is she doing after those stories have been shared with the world? And what are the responses that she has heard from across Canada and beyond? We have a feature interview with her coming up. Right now, let's go to Heather Wells in our news center with headlines.
Good morning. Well, Manitoba's advocate for children and youth says the province is failing young people when it comes to mental health and substance abuse. Sherry Gott's comments come in light of recent data suggesting 911 calls involving drugs and young people in Winnipeg have nearly doubled in a decade. And Gott says existing addiction services and prevention work are not meeting the growing needs of youth in this city. A Winnipegger says the WestJet strike has left him in a travel ordeal. Kurt Miskew spent thousands of dollars on tickets to get home from London, England, because he couldn't reach WestJet by phone, online, or in person. He says he supports the airline workers, but he says WestJet needs to do better by its customers. I'll be back with more on those stories and other news from Manitoba coming up at 8:30.
Thanks, Heather.
Thanks.
Okay, it's time to get into this forecast with Abby.
Yes, it's a cooler than seasonal start across the province, Mercy. We're looking at temperatures below normal temperatures to start the day. We're looking at readings in the low 20s across the southern regions, and we will see similar conditions in the north. For now, we're looking at 14 degrees in the city. It is sunny outside. Expect a mix of sun and clouds at some point later in the day. while we warm up to a high of 21. The winds will definitely be blowing from the west later before cooling us to about 12 degrees. Now across the Pembina Valley, the Westman, the Parkland, the Interlake region, similar conditions. We're seeing temperatures hovering between 10 and 14 at this time. Some areas seeing clear skies, some areas seeing some cloudy conditions. Well, we're seeing foggy conditions towards the U.S. border, but it's going to be a cool and breezy afternoon with highs near 22 degrees alongside some west winds. Now for the north, central and far north, we're seeing temperatures close to 13 degrees this morning. Cloudy conditions, light rain in some areas. We're still tracking those misty conditions in the Churchill area. Temperatures between 14 and 20 at this time, and there's a chance of showers and gusty northwest winds in that part of the province. So overall, Marcy, it's going to be cool and breezy across board, and then the warmer weather will start to return as we get to the midweek parts of the week. For Winnipeg right now, 14 and sunny. We head to 21 later.
All right, thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
Cora Funk is in.
Hi, yeah, Dougal and Bernays is the only Bernays.
Yeah.
Thank you. Is the only issue this morning right now. Lights flashing red there, so that may throw off your commute a little bit. Other than that, though, been pretty quiet overall. But if you do see something going on, give me a call on the CBC commuter line. That number 204-788-3093.
Well, up first this half hour, criticisms of a Palestinian exhibit at the Canadian Museum for Human Rights started before it even opened. It led to the resignation of the museum trustee, Mark Berlin, who wrote in a letter that he thought the exhibit was, quote, one-sided. Then last week, philanthropist Gail Asker, who played a critical role in founding the museum, announced that her family was pausing their funding over the exhibit. The exhibit is called Palestine Uprooted, Nakba Past and Present. It was curated through interviews with displaced Palestinians. It explores the Nakba, the Arabic term for catastrophe, which describes Israel's declaration of independence in 1948 that led to the displacement of approximately 750,000 Palestinians. Now, in a recent interview on Information Radio, a museum studies professor weighed in, saying that the curator's responsibility is primarily to the community the exhibit is about. This is Irina Mahaleke, who's an associate professor in the Faculty of Information at the University of Toronto, speaking about the Nakba exhibit.
This is a community-centric exhibition. So the first thing that a museum should do in situations like this, when an exhibition becomes controversial, is to check in with the communities.
Check in with the community, she said, that were directly involved in the content. Now, my next guest was Rana Abdullah is the owner of Yafa Cafe in Winnipeg. She was one of the contributors to the Nakba exhibit and involved with the ground floor of developing it for years. I spoke with her and recorded an interview with her on Friday after the show.
Thanks for having me.
Tell me a little bit about when your involvement in the Nakba exhibit started.
Yeah, my involvement began long before the exhibition itself. Since shortly after it was announced in 2007, I moved from Ottawa in 2009 to Winnipeg, long before it opened in 2014. So when it was announced as first national museum dedicated to human rights, I believed then, as I believe now, that the Nakba belongs to this museum, was a place for people to learn from one another. So I carried this work on behalf of my community because I believe that nobody can tell the Palestinian story like the Palestinians themselves. But what followed was nearly 2 decades of persistent dialogue and determination, facing setbacks, disappointments, and difficult conversations. And after years of advocacy, the turning point came in 2020 when the museum's new leadership was willing to engage. And in 2022, the museum established a Palestinian Content Advisory Network. And over the past 4 years, I worked along Palestinian scholars, university professors, researchers, and artists to help shape the exhibition's historical narrative.
So this has been years in the making. So tell me a little bit about what your personal contributions were in terms of the elements you actually donated by way of physical things, but also stories.
Yeah, like I want to say that the museum followed, like despite all the contributions, the museum followed independent and rigorous research process. And I'm so proud that they stood behind that. So because that exhibit presents Palestine rarely seen in the media through voices of Nakba survivors, my contribution was help to introduce those Nakba survivors. And because I'm connected all across Canada, lived in so many provinces, I was able to locate many of the Nakba survivors and ensure that those stories were historically accurate and told through Palestinian voices. I explained that the Nakba was not simply an event in 1948, and what led to the Nakba was unfolding in 1947 and the consequences that we still live today. I also contributed a historical content on the 1947 UN partition plan, explaining how the Palestinians viewed that fundamentally unfair, that the partition of Palestine without the consent of Palestinians was being asked to accept that division of their homeland, and this was essential to explain. I contributed my family story and personal objects for the exhibition.
What is your family story and what objects? You were one of the people that had a key that was donated,
I
right?
That key, and it was passed through a generation. Just a reminder that the story was unfinished. It was the key that my grandfather locked the door every night for the peace and safety of his children, and that house key he kept in the hope of return, and it displayed in the exhibit. And it's a story also of countless Palestinians.
There's also a dress as well, an embroidered dress. Is that right?
Yes, this dress on display, it's a bridal dress from Gaza that's part of my mother's collection. My mother spent decades of preserving traditional dresses and jewelry and pieces of Palestinian lives because she believed that our heritage could quietly disappear, one object at a time. And she brought her collection to Canada when she immigrated here post-Gulf War. And I inherited that responsibility, and I was honored to share it as part of the collection in the museum.
What did it feel like? Oh, go ahead, please.
My hope when people see this embroidered dress, maybe they can imagine the bride who wore that dress, my grandparents who held that key and hoping for return.
What did it feel like as that key was held by your grandparents, and then, as you said, it was handed down? So that's such it's such a physical embodiment of giving a hope almost to a next generation, or?
Yeah, this object doesn't talk, but it tells a story. It's a powerful keeper of our memory. It carries the lives of the people who touched it. They preserved it. We preserve our humanity. And for somebody to lose home, it's more than losing a building. So this object becomes important because that's what connects us to the life that was lived before. Everything was damaged. All the records were destroyed. It's not like we have things, like so many things tangible. We saved whatever we saved.
In terms of the controversy now, to where we started, what has it been like for you watching all of this controversy around the exhibit unfold in our community?
The exhibition generated those discussions, and there are some meaningful conversations. And this is what Human Rights Museum should encourage. What has been really disappointing, despite we've been elated and very happy to see how Nakba was recognized in Canada's National Museum and the history that shaped my ancestors for almost 8 decades. But it's disappointing that the public discussion that followed, instead of listening to the voices of Palestinians and Nakba survivors and their descendants who share their memories and lived experiences, much of the debate was focused on what non-Palestinian think that what the exhibit should say. It has been to break our hearts even more that our elders in the community who shared their oral history and painful lived experiences are being ignored or treated that their stories is an error because they do not reflect the language that non-Palestinians believe should be used. And instead of listening to those voices, much of the media attention has focused on what the Nakba exhibit should say. And this exhibit is not for a debate or something. It's created for people to understand our disposition, our displacement, the ongoing, not the impact, and what has been ongoing since 1948. This is the focus. This is why all the focus on supposed controversy and discussion. What should be there in the views of the Minister of Culture or other opponents, and despite all of this, I remain encouraged because I believe the museum fulfilled its responsibility. It should not tell people like what to think or impose a verdict on a contested history. Its role is to present carefully this research history alongside the voices of the people who lived it. And to trust the visitors to reflect, to ask questions. They can critique it, they can think whatever, but they have to reach their own conclusion. And this is what the museum did. Like it's centered the voices of the victims, just exactly what they did for Japanese Canadian internment. And this is precisely what it has done, created this space to engage us and through displacement, memory, and resilience. And it's like they're really great. Like I'm so proud of them.
I'm wondering what you were responding to the controversy, but I wonder what feedback you've had personally from the exhibit. Like when people email you about it, are you hearing support, or like what do you hear directly about it?
Well, while acknowledging that it has drawn criticism, we received thousands of email of support. Not me, the museum has received thousands of emails from people across Canada. I know that my network and my community have been sending letters and supporting, expressing their support to the museum. And I know from reading the media that the exhibition received overwhelming support from even the civil society. You probably know that more than 70 organizations of human rights groups, labor unions, faith communities, legal organizations have publicly defended the museum and the leadership and their independence. And they described the exhibition important contribution to the public understanding. At my restaurant, I see visitors I've never seen before. They're coming from all across Canada just to visit the museum. They take the flight today, they visit the museum, they make sure it's not Monday so that the museum is not closed, and they take the flight next day, all with their children or groups. I receive group after group after group in my restaurant. I don't know, they find me somewhere, but I know that the visitation has more than doubled after the installation of this exhibit. So this is the focus, that the people want to see what Canada is doing and what the museum is doing to foster this understanding about human rights and what they mean. And I hope that the people who come see it with an open mind, whether they agree or not agree. The point is to listen, to learn, to better understand the human experiences that's presented.
What would your grandfather think about this, about that key that he saved and handed down through generations, now being in this Museum of Human Rights?
My grandfather, those objects, it's his home. He held it until the day he died. And then this key moved from my grandfather to my grandmother, from my grandmother to my mother. Then it came to me. And it's just, it represents their life, their generation. They were told that they're coming after 2 weeks. So they're deeply rooted in their land for generation. They suddenly lose home. They suddenly lose the land. They suddenly find themselves wake up in the morning in a tent, and there was no time to think or gather. They only picked up whatever they could, and that key, the key for the front of the house and the key for the barn. And everybody from the Palestinian families experienced the Nakba different way. They just fled. They left, and they passed that key, passed through generation. A reminder that the story is unfinished.
We'll leave it there. Thank you very much, Rana, for being with us.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
That was my conversation from Friday after the show with Rana Abdullah, the owner of Yafa Cafe in Winnipeg, who was also one of the contributors and someone who was at the ground floor of researching and helping advise and work with the museum on the Nakba exhibit here in Winnipeg.
I'm Jura McElwraith, your local reporter for CBC Manitoba in Steinbach. You're listening to CBC Radio 1.
Well, it's 8:27, which means we have time to slide in a little local music. Maybe you're going to see Ami Chian, who's released her new album, Aries, Baby. She's celebrating with her album release at Times Change, High and Lonesome, coming up soon on August 7th in a couple of days. She might play this. This is Driving.
Driving round with you by my side makes me feel so good, makes me feel alive. Windows down, breeze blowing, don't know where we feel like going, but you're by my side, yeah, you're by my side. Stay by my side, by my side. I got nothing but open road and time. I don't even care about the clouds in the sky. They looking kinda cute, kinda caught my eye, my eye. You like it when I speed up and when I take it slow. Anywhere you want, yeah, just tell me to go. Are we there yet? Are we getting close? Baby, you kissed it. Feels so good when I'm driving with you. Let's slow down like a dating picture. Maybe make a stop and just take a video. A video, a video, a video, a video. Like that drone, giving expensive. Back it up, only the best. La la la, baby, you guessed it. Baby, you guessed it. Baby, you guessed it. Baby, you kissed it.
So Drive-In, that is an artist that's going to be playing Times Changed High and Lonesome Club on August 7th. You can check out Ami Chian's album release coming up later this week. Thanks for joining us, 788-3093 if you have any issues in your commute late in the show here, but we will pass them along after your CBC News from Winnipeg.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 8:30, it is 14 degrees, lots of sun out there. Bit of a cool change. If you like it cool, you'll be happy to hear we're just slightly cooler than seasonal. A high today of 21 and partly sunny. We get back up to normal tomorrow. A kidnapping case in Winnipeg that recently sent a man to prison highlights a growing so-called gray market for vapes. Court heard the incident happened after the breakdown of a business partnership involving gray market vape products being sold at convenience stores. Queen's University professor Christian Leprecht says many people don't realize the problems with buying gray market vapes. He says more public awareness is needed.
They're not familiar with the risks that they're exposing themselves to, with the associations with organized crime that's feeding, with the fact that these don't remit taxes properly. Much greater public awareness on this would also make a significant difference.
Leprecht recently published a paper suggesting legal vapes still make up a good portion of Manitoba's market. Manitoba's first supervised consumption site opens a week from today. Earlier this year, the province began accepting people at its 72-hour detox center in Winnipeg. Some critics say these NDP steps do not address the growing needs of young people dealing with addictions. CBC's Rosanna Hempel reports.
So this is naloxone.
Alexa Legier has to use her naloxone kit at least twice a day on Main Street in downtown Winnipeg. This Community 204 support worker says at least once a day it's for teens.
2 weeks ago, we had 3 girls under the age of 18 experience a drug poisoning. That's something I haven't seen in the past.
Between 2016 and 2025 in Winnipeg, paramedic responses involving drugs in young people nearly doubled. Calls related to alcohol, crystal meth, and opioids saw the biggest increases. Manitoba's child advocate Sherry Gott isn't surprised.
It's really concerning. We're failing our youth in Manitoba because of the lack of response by government.
The province recently opened its 7th Huddle, a mental health and wellness youth hub in Portage-la Prairie, with another one slated for northern Manitoba. Addictions and Homelessness Minister Bernadette Smith says the government continues to listen and implement changes based on feedback. Rosanna Hempel, CBC News, Winnipeg.
A Winnipegger says he has spent thousands on flights home after he couldn't reach WestJet. Kurt Miskew says he found out August 1st his return flight from London, England had been cancelled because of the strike at WestJet. He says he was presented with an updated itinerary 2 hours later, but the trip didn't show up. With no luck reaching WestJet, he says he bought tickets with another airline.
$4,800 each to get home. And then we're just going to have to present the bill to WestJet after that and be like, you guys could have done this for us.
Miskew says he supports the workers in their right to strike, but says the airline has to do better by its customers. WestJet says passengers impacted by that one-day strike will be refunded or reaccommodated. Winnipeggers stepped up to sew dozens of new outfits after Ghana's Folklorama Pavilion had theirs stolen. The pavilion's performance outfits were stolen last week, just days before the festival kicked off on Sunday. Jaylyn Warminer is the pavilion's head of guest services. She says the outfits were stolen from her vehicle on Thursday, but from Friday to Saturday, more than 20 people gathered to see new outfits to sew new outfits for the pavilion's dancers.
I would never have wanted this to happen, and I felt so sad that it happened on my watch. But this has turned into such a blessing. All of the prayers and hopes and wishes that people had for us just multiplied over and over again.
Programming at the Ghana Pavilion, as with all pavilions during this first week, runs until Saturday. You can find the latest news updated throughout your day. All you have to do is head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thanks, Heather.
Thank you.
Heather Wells in our news department, also James Turner and Mike Arsenault. Big thanks to our team in Studio 15, Corey Funk, Abby Adiemi, and Darren Marash. And then our producers, Nellie Gonzalez, and the senior producer of audio at CBC Manitoba, Leif Larson. In addition, thanks to the associate producers who worked hard on content for today's show. They are Sophia Peralta-Barone, as well as Sierra Sanders and Emily Enns. Well, speaking of Corey Funk, who I mentioned there, he is in with a last look at the commute.
Yeah, Dougald and Bernay, those lights were flashing red. They're now back up and running, so it should be good to go there. I'll leave with some positive traffic.
Okay, great. Thanks, Corey.
No problem.
And Abby, what is happening in the forecast?
It's going to be that one hit blip. We have a cool one today, more like a Tuesday, cooler than seasonal for this part of this time of the year. Southern Manitoba, we're looking at temperatures between 10 and 14, warming to 22, while up north we're seeing temperatures near 13 degrees at this time. We'll see highs in the 20s. But Winnipeg, it's sunny, 14 right now. We get to a high of 21 later.
All right. Thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
Well, your next local programming is Radio Noon. And don't forget, they every day have a provincial call-in. Starts at 12:15, and they introduce the question, and then they take your calls. So if you want to weigh in, if you want to tune in and see what they're talking today, Radio Noon between noon and 1 over your lunch hour. And then between 3 and 6 o'clock, it's Up to Speed, right here on CBC Manitoba. Thanks for listening to 89.3 FM this morning or watching us on YouTube. Great to have you with us. I'm Marcy Marcusa. The Current is next.